News, Indianapolis.
You're listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
The Indiana Pacers are trading to the Washington Wizards the draft rights to Bilal Coulibaly, the 7th pick, and the Wizards are trading to the Pacers the draft rights to Jarace Walker, the 8th pick.
You know, we think Walker's a really unique prospect because of his ability to handle, see the floor, pass, make plays. He's one of these guys that's just one of those rare, young, big guys that really has great feel for the game.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited. Like, we have some high-level talented dudes over there, like Mathurin, like you said, Turner, Halliburton.
How you like me now? How you like me now? How you like me now? How you like me now?
Kevin, it was kind of a weird route to get there, but in the end, the Pacers ended up basically with the destination that was anticipated, right?
Yeah, you know, there's, I think, a little bit of that initial, like, wait, what's going on here? Certainly if you weren't following things on Twitter, which I know a large majority of our audience is not glued to that during the draft. But Jarace Walker with pick number 8, not pick number 7, he joins the Pacers and then a bunch of guards the rest of the way. Good Friday morning to you. Kevin Bowen, Jay Query, and Mark Dykton. Chad Buchanan, the GM of the Pacers, going to join us a little bit later in the show. We will certainly break down all the prospects and all the madness from last night. And if you are a fan of the Indiana Hoosiers or a fan of Trayce Jackson-Davis, did you have to make it till, was it 12:45? Did it reach 1 o'clock?
It was close.
The second to last pick of the night, the Golden State Warriors get back into round 2 to take Trayce Jackson-Davis at number 57 overall. You check out Trayce's tweet right after the Pacers passed on him at number 47.
I did not actually see his tweet.
He didn't seem to be too pleased with his fall. You all will regret it, I promise you. Pacers passed on him, I guess you could say 3 realistic times, 26, 47, and 55. But he goes to Golden State, and honestly, even if you just want to separate, like he goes to the best franchise in the NBA over the last 10 years, there's probably not a better roster makeup for a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis in the entire NBA than there. You know, at that point of the draft, Jake, there's probably some of you that's like, hey, just go undrafted and pick your spot. If he had to pick a spot, I think Golden State would have been pretty high on the list, if not at the top of the list.
By the way, I'm curious of this. I'm sure it means something that I'm missing out on, and I have no idea. Well, what number was Trayce Jackson-Davis at Indiana?
23, right?
Yeah. Have you looked at his Twitter profile picture?
I've not, no.
Maybe he wore this jersey in a game. Did they wear them? Now that I'm thinking about it, was there some game where they all wore that? In his Twitter profile picture, he's wearing jersey number 4.
Oh, did he wear that early in his career?
Did he?
For some reason, 4 feels like he did wear that at some point.
But nonetheless, interesting because Golden State was one that we talked about, Kevin, you know, with Draymond Green and you know, the future uncertain for Draymond Green. What did we say? That we thought Trayce Jackson-Davis could be a Draymond Green kind of player, right? And then all of a sudden Golden State goes and gets him.
They don't have a player on the roster over 6'9". Like, again, even if you just separate, he's going to the Warriors. I mean, like, everyone gets that. Oh, my gosh, Trayce going to the Warriors. That's great. But, again, from a roster standpoint, Mike Dunleavy said it last night. Mike Dunleavy's their new GM. He's like, Trayce is going to have a good chance to be on our 15-man roster. You know, when you talk about the Pacers' second-round picks, we just talk about them as two-way guys.
Right.
Trayce, that doesn't appear to be the case. So, again, a lot of weight. Obviously, he's disappointed. But if you were going to talk about the best team for his fit to kind of quote-unquote go for, Golden State doesn't have a lot of bigs at all, and JaMychal Green's really old. He's one of them. So,
yeah, I guess the easiest way to say it would be because you start getting into a point where you're like, man, you might be better off at this point not being drafted and being able to pick where you go. This would have been one of the best options that he would have looked into, right?
Without question. Jalen Hood-Schifino, number 17 to the Lakers. So just outside of the lottery for him. Jake, overall, thoughts on what the Pacers did?
Let's begin with this. because I know a lot of people probably asked it as initially. I mean, your first reaction is like, what? But it makes sense when you really break it down. I think what we saw was the Pacers were sitting at 7, and you had Washington at 8. On the clock was a guy that Washington really wanted. And either the Pacers knew that that's who Washington really wanted, or Washington inquired to the Pacers that that's who they really wanted, and to see if, we're talking about the guy that the Pacers technically drafted. And
Bilal Coulibaly, am I saying that right?
He was Wembanyama's teammate in France, right? And so whether real or fictional, all account is that it was San Antonio. But at some point, Indiana said to Washington, hey, listen, just so you know, we're sitting here at 7 and your guy's there, but we're getting phone calls from people that want him. So if you want to secure that this is your guy, what are you willing to give us? And Washington said, we'll give you 2 future second rounders to draft him, and then we'll take your guy at 8 and we'll just flop him. Now, there is part of me that's like, why wouldn't you just trade the picks right then and let Washington make the selection? But I think you have to turn in the paperwork and et cetera. I don't know what you're talking about, a condensed amount of time. So the Pacers draft the player for Washington with the knowledge that Washington will then take Walker for Indiana, right, the next pick back. And that way Indiana, for doing Washington that solid of protecting their guy for them, gets 2 second-round picks of the future. Now,
and they pay Walker a little bit less money than they would have at 7.
That's the big one. So you say to yourself, well, why would you, if you're the Pacers, why do them that solid? What do you care? And that's the answer is you now, because the NBA salaries are set up based on pick, you now are paying $510,000 less per year to Walker than you would have if you took him at 7. So if you're Walker, you're probably like, well, I got completely
if you're
jobbed
the agent,
there, right?
Come on now.
Yeah.
He was a guy that obviously I think we all probably would have pegged as the favorite coming into the night. I mean, you just need a presence. You need an attitude on the defensive end of the floor. And last year, the Pacers averaged a franchise best, NBA franchise best, 116 points per game. Offense, no issue for the Pacers last season. And they lost 47 games. They weren't really sniffing a playoff spot. They had to get better on that end of the floor. I think there's a lot of things to like about Walker. So much of it is on that defensive end. I mean, Jake, you don't see a lot of 5-stars that are like, yeah, I'll go play for Kelvin Sampson. That's not a coach that's going to let you skate by.
Right.
And I think that sort of defensive mindset, the intensity that Houston plays with, obviously in Walker, so many people want to comp him to somebody. I know his body type is not this guy, but Jake, I think he's got some Thad Young ability to him of a defensive, versatile piece that the question is, okay, how much can he give you offensively? Particularly, how much can he give you shooting the basketball? 34% from 3. That's not horrific, but you would like that number to rise a little bit. And Rick Carlisle said it last night. Really feels like offensively, he's got a nice feel, whether that is as a cutter, as a passer, things like that. And, Tyrese Halliburton tends to get a little bit more out of those guys. So I was totally fine with Walker as the pick there. I'm good with shooting with Ben Sheppard, the later first-round pick out of Belmont. Had some big-time games, 33, 35, 41 points at Belmont over the last 2 years. Again, Buddy Hield's in a contract year. Buddy Hield is north of 30. You can never have enough shooting. If I'm going to nitpick, it just seemed like they drafted a bunch of 2 guards the rest of the way. And again, guards and shooting, it's fine to, I guess, bet on a little bit. I know there's some questions about Mojave King, their 47th pick, and his shooting. I would have liked to have seen a few more kind of 3s and 4s because I feel like the roster could use that. But defensive focus, you got the future first-round pick, a little bit of shooting. I'm good with the night.
I know a lot of people, and understandably so, are like, how in the world did the Pacers pass on Trayce Jackson-Davis?
Hell, if I'm Trayce, I wouldn't want to come here.
Correct. That's what I was going to say. They might have done it solid there, right? Because they kind of have a log jam. They do need. I will say though, they do need probably one more power forward. But I don't know that he would have been a fit here, and the pressure just would have been tough. I think.
How many times did we sit here last year, Jake, after games, and be like, "Man, they couldn't get Isaiah Jackson a few more minutes. They couldn't get Jalen Smith a few more minutes." Well, now you have Jarace Walker, and you have lost nobody in the front court. Nobody's a free agent. I guess O'Shea Brissett maybe would qualify in that front court, but yeah, if I'm Trayce Jackson-Davis, I mean, Golden State to me is an ideal fit from a roster standpoint. Again, a little bit more on Ben Sheppard out of Belmont. Played there for 4 years. This is who they took at number 26 overall. 6'6", 37% career shooter from three. Shot at 41% last year. You know, something that I think that I was a little bit intrigued by with Sheppard is when you think like at least my stereotype, and I apologize if this is the wrong stereotype, when I think of mid-major shooters, Jake, I'm like, oh, that dude probably can't guard anybody.
Right.
He was all first team Missouri Valley defensively. So I don't think he's like obviously he's not like a liability on that end of the floor. When I saw this pick, and honestly a little bit of the Jarace Walker pick, I almost look at it and think, boy, is this the end for that 2021 draft of Chris Duarte and Isaiah Jackson in round one?
I'm about to sneeze again.
No, all you.
This happens every morning, you know. The one thing about coming out of the Missouri Valley and being an all-defensive league player, I've always felt like Kevin, the Moval is a really well-coached league. Like, if you're coming out of the Missouri Valley where you've been efficient, you probably are a pretty smart player because you're going against, like, really good defensive sets, I think.
And Belmont's known for that, really.
Night in and night out, yeah. But I had to chuckle. J&V caught it too and tweeted it out when they were talking about him, and they said, he's a dead-eye shooter when left unguarded. I'm like, yeah, because that happens a lot in the NBA.
So
right?
is J&V, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He threw out his own player comps, Ben Sheppard. He used Caleb Martin, who obviously we saw with Miami, Quentin Grimes for the Knicks, and then another guy in the final, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And I think just getting a shooter for that second unit, you know, you have TJ McConnell, of course, you have Andrew Nembhard, you have Aaron Nesmith. Nembhard and Nesmith can certainly hit perimeter shots, but I think now you throw him in there with Jordan Nwora, that's a little bit more shooting. And I just think Halliburton, the more shooters you put around Halliburton, the better. I mean, he's just going to find guys with open shots.
Jordan Nwora, that's a funny mention because you kind of forget about him. And when they got him last year for, I can't even remember what they gave up for him, but he was like instant offense, right?
And shooting, you know, from the perimeter there. Does Mojave King qualify as one of the cooler Pacer names?
Yeah, that's pretty cool, right? I mean,
New Zealand.
That means he's a Kiwi, right?
Yeah, he sounds like Jason Day when you hear him talk.
The one thing that I noticed, a couple of observations from the draft, Kevin. First off, and I wondered if I was the only one that noticed this. But we were well into the draft. First off, to me, I think that there is almost a bias. I think people look at the NBA draft even more so than the NFL draft. People look at the NBA draft and they go, these guys are 19 years old because they're drafting a lot of players right out of college 1 year or the gap year for the G League. So a lot of these guys are 19, 20 years old. And there's a natural societal resentment about that to a lot of people. I can't believe this guy's 19 and they're paying him all this money. They're making millions of dollars, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that for a while there was the concern of like maturity issues of like this kid's too young. What's that?
Sound like you were blowing up. Everything
yeah,
good?
I need to put my phone on silent. I think there's naturally like this resentment of like these guys are too young to be getting all this money, and yet what we are now seeing is players that have been in the spotlight for a while and just kind of know how to handle it. And so my long-winded point here is we were like 7 or 8 draft picks in, and in the interviews, I thought to myself, these are all really polite, nice kids. I say kids. I know they're young men. But I just thought every one of these players seems very, like Shanna made the point. She's like, well, he seems nice. He seems humble. Like, he is so happy to be there. I mean, instead of guys coming in like that had kind of this, and I'm sure they're all very confident and sure of themselves. My point being, I thought it was kind of a feel-good draft. I mean, you had very nice parents that were up there, like happy for their kids. You had players that were all really respectful of the interview. I don't know why they didn't have 2 microphones for both, or 3 for the little panel, because they had to like pass the mic back and forth. It was very awkward. There were a lot of weird, awkward, pregnant pauses last night. The panel itself with Jay Billis and JJ Redick, like nobody kind of
really
knew.
Struggled.
Yeah, they didn't know like when to talk, and it just was, that part was odd.
More Redick, please. Less of the others up there.
Yeah, Billis a couple of times looked like he either wasn't paying attention or was about to fall asleep.
And at times, so we have 2 different telecasts, right? There's an ABC telecast.
I think that's right. I watched the ESPN.
Yeah, I watched the ESPN. At times, I wanted to say, like, this should be the ABC telecast. I'm all for interviewing the parents. But isn't that more of the ABC feel when you're trying to get like the casual fan? Isn't ESPN a little bit more for the nitty gritty stuff?
Yeah, that's a real good point.
Like a little bit more for the analysis. And again, I think Redick is crazy talented on air. I think he's really, really good. And at times they just like forgot about him, or in my opinion, didn't utilize him enough. The other thing, and I feel like this is an annual one, and Mark, you certainly brought it up as soon as we walked in studio. From an NBA rule standpoint, can we just all get on the same page with these trades and not confuse the hell out of the audience?
That's the thing.
Maddie was so confused when I'm like, she's like, oh, this is the guy that we're drafting? I was talking about the French guy. And I'm like, no, actually not, And she's like, why aren't they saying anything on ESPN about this trade? And then sure enough, 5 minutes later, here comes Bobby Marks or here comes Woj. It's so confusing for the audience, especially when 95% of the audience isn't locked to Twitter like I am.
By the way, how about Woj at one point? And I like Adrian Wojnarowski, but how about at one point when they caught him off guard, he's like, sorry, I'm texting with a GM right now. Sure you are.
Well, like, why can't it be like the NFL draft where, like, oh, the Houston Texans have just traded up to 2. Here's the details. Right. And then we go. Like, instead, if you're not following on Twitter, you're like, okay, the Pacers drafted this guy who's from France, but now we're...
I want to know this. Does the player... Okay, let me ask you guys this.
Jarace Walker said he did not initially know that the trade was happening. He thought he was a Wizard there for a period of time.
So, does he keep the Wizards hat? Would you keep the hat?
Well, you give it to your best high school friend.
Yeah, why not? It's a collector's item.
Like
Put
the picture
on eBay.
Does Kawhi Leonard still have his Pacers hat?
I was going to say the picture of Kawhi Leonard in a Pacers hat. Does he still have the Pacer hat?
Kawhi strikes me as he has 0 sports gear in his house.
Totally agree with that, yeah.
And the reason for that, Mark, is the NBA's league year. So in the NFL, free agency is mid-March. The draft is late April. So technically you're in the next year. For the NBA, their new league year doesn't begin until a week from today, free agency. So that's why you don't see these trades finalized. It's way too confusing. Just figure it out.
Just move the draft then.
Move it, like whatever you have to do, because it is... ESPN would have that little, graphic in the bottom left corner of proposed trade, unless you were looking for it.
Right.
That's not the thing that you initially thought. So I thought the overall coverage was really poor. The 4th and final pick for the Pacers last night at number 55, which occurred at about 12:30. This was the IU killer, right? Isaiah Wong.
That's what somebody just texted me when you heard my phone blowing up.
27 for Isaiah Wong in the tournament for Miami, the ACC Player of the Year. Big-time score. I think like his positional fit in the NBA is a question. He's like a 6'3" kind of scorer. It's not a point guard. It's not some 6'6", 6'7" wing. He strikes me as a dude that will have some big nights for the Mad Ants and potentially be a 9th man one day.
Hey, Jake, it's not so much that IU fans are upset the Pacers passed on Trayce Jackson-Davis, but they took the guy that knocked IU out of the tourney. Yeah?
Didn't someone tweet at us last night? They're like, oh, yeah. At Pacers, don't pick Trayce Jackson-Davis when they could have. Instead, they pick a guy that killed us in the tournament. Really in touch with their fan base here. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
because Kevin Pritchard's job is to pick a bunch of IUBB players.
Yeah, I mean,
come on. I thought that was wild.
And let's not forget, okay? I was livid. Matter of fact, I'll tell you in 30 seconds because we're probably up against it. A quick story. So, a couple of years ago, the family that lives across the street from Shannon moved. They've lived there for 40 years, right? They moved. Shannon happens to live 2 doors down from her parents. It's kind of hard to explain.
Three doors down's got some decent songs.
That's right, yeah. Well, Superman lives there. So, at any rate, when the neighbors across the street were moving, Shannon went over there to, take cookies or whatever, we're sorry to see you go. You've been great neighbors. And the neighbor says, I can tell you this now, but I didn't want to tell you then. And she said, okay. And he said, in 1987, when your father, because her father at the time was the general manager of the Pacers, and the neighbor said, in 1987, when your father drafted Reggie Miller, the Indiana State Police actually had a temporary post at our house for 3 days because they had received so many what they considered to be credible threats to your father because he didn't draft Steve Alford.
Dear Lord.
And he drafted Reggie Miller. So the state police they're like, so that was the excitement of our living here is we had the state police hunkered down in our garage for 3 days to watch your parents' house, but they didn't want your dad to know to worry him. So
that's a bit frightening.
That is a true story. So my point being that at that time, and I remember I was in the 8th grade, and WIBC had Reggie Miller on, and I called and said, I wanted Steve Alford, and I represent a lot of people. What do you think about that? And he said, well, hopefully you'll like my game too. And at that time, Reggie Miller was nothing more than a trash-talking shooting guard that had beaten Indiana in the NIT. And people were like, I can't believe, not only did they not take Steve Alford, they took the guy that knocked Steve Alford's team out of the NIT when he was a sophomore. It worked out okay. Their job is to make the Indiana Pacers the best team they can be. And
again, I think the fit for Trayce Jackson-Davis is ideal.
Totally. If I'm Trayce Jackson-Davis, I am elated.
Yeah, where he ended up. Grady Dick, more Elton John or more figure skater?
Let me tell you.
Or if a figure skater and Elton John had a kid, maybe that's what Grady Dick was wearing last night.
I have thoughts on that.
Because you're our fashion police. That looked like something he might have got out of Paul George or Tyrese Halliburton's closet.
I have thoughts on that, Kevin, that we'll get to in 15 minutes, and people are going to think I'm the old guy, which I am maybe, but I'm curious if my thoughts are off base.
Chad Buchanan going to join us. Is that 9:40 for Chad Buchanan?
In that vicinity.
Okay, 9:40 for the Pacers GM coming up a little bit later today. We'll play some audio from Rick Carlisle last night, his comments on Jarace Walker and Ben Sheppard in particular. For those that are just now waking up, the Pacers made 4 selections last night. Jarace Walker out of Houston at number 8. That is a forward. Ben Sheppard, a guard from Belmont at 26 overall. And then the second round, a couple of guards again. 47 overall was Mojave King from New Zealand. Played for the G League Ignite last year. And then at 55, Isaiah Wong. That is the Miami ACC Player of the Year, who again had 27 points against Indiana in their tournament win. Those were the 4 selections for the Pacers. From an the state of Indiana standpoint, the connections that were drafted, Jalen Hood-Schifino, 17 to the Lakers. And with the second to last pick of the night, the Golden State Warriors got back into the second round to take Trayce Jackson-Davis.
Mojave King, by the way, that guy rules in the desert. If they play in a desert, he is lights out.
Home and home with the Sahara Knights. Is that what you're saying? Coming up next for the Pacers?
That's right.
He's Jake Query. I'm Kevin Bowen. Mark Dykton with us, of course. Good Friday morning to you. Hope you guys have had a great week. Thanks for finishing up with us. You're listening to Kevin Query right here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Obviously, the NBA draft was the straw mixing the drink in the world of sports last night, but let's begin with Major League Baseball. A couple of scores to note. The Braves over the Phillies 5-1. Braves and Reds series at Great America this weekend.
Let's go.
Sold out.
Let's go.
Sold out. Diamondbacks over the Nationals 5-3 in the race for PBR. The Athletics short in against the Guardians 6-1. Padres blanked the Giants 10-0. Royals over the Rays 6-5. Marlins over the Pirates 6-4. Mariners over the Yanks 10-2.
How about that College World Series game last night? I was flipping back and forth in the bottom of the 11th. Is there a better name in baseball than Tommy Tanks? Tommy Tanks from LSU. He looks like a tank. Walk-off home run. Breaks a 0-0 game in the 11th there. It'll be LSU and Florida for the national title. It's a 3-game series beginning tomorrow, and the Fever won last night in Seattle. But on NBA draft fronts, the first pick last night for the Pacers was indeed Jarace Walker. How about those that bet Jarace Walker number 7 to the Pacers, not cashing that bet?
Well, even our station sent out like picks that the Pacers will take with the 7th, and I think myself, JMV, and I somebody else had Jarace Walker. I'm like, did everybody lose? Did no one get it then? Because technically,
the gamblers are not cashing that one.
Yeah.
Number 8 was Jarace Walker in a trade back with Washington. Here was Rick Carlisle last night on the Houston forward.
In a league where defensive versatility, the ability to switch and contain is so important, we believe he can do that. And then, offensively, there's a chance here that he could really evolve into a special kind of four-man in this league. A guy that can rebound it and take it coast to coast and make plays and finish at the rim and, do all that stuff. So I think when our fans start to watch him, they'll see the possibilities.
Now, the Pacers weren't done in round number 1. They had a second pick, of course, the 26th overall. They elected for Ben Sheppard, who, not a huge name, admittedly, native of Atlanta, played at Belmont. While at Belmont, played in 124 games over the course of his career, 12-point-per-game score, averaged nearly 19 a game as a senior, but shot 41% from three-point range. And one of those guys that really used the post-graduation process, if you will, to put himself even further on the NBA radar. Isn't that right, Carlisle?
He played great on both ends. He's got a high skill level. He's had a pretty consistent rise in the draft, starting with the combine where he played extremely well. So, he's a 6'5" wing player. He just moves, he shoots it, passes it, dribbles it, defends, goes hard.
I guess that's what you'd like, right? The fact that he seemingly has a quick release shot from the outside is what appears to have intrigued the Pacers about Ben Sheppard.
Yeah, and then in the second round, 2 other guards. Mojave King from New Zealand played for the G League Ignite. That screams kind of two-way contract for me, and probably the other guy too. Isaiah Wong from Miami. I think Wong is actually a name some college basketball fans will remember. He was the ACC Player of the Year at Miami, a little bit of a smaller guard, had a big game against Indiana in the tournament. And then speaking of Indiana, for those that missed it last night, Jalen Hood-Schifino, 17 to the Lakers. And with the second to last pick of the night, Trayce Jackson-Davis to the Warriors. As we've mentioned several times already this morning, to me, that is a great, great fit considering you look at the roster of the Warriors. Big guys are not on that roster. And Mike Dunleavy said it last night. Their GM, Trayce, has got a great chance to be on that 15-man roster given the makeup of what they have. We will break all of that down, and you have got some Grady Dick thoughts, Jake?
I do. That sounds really weird when you say it that way. But some auxiliary commentary about the draft last night.
Maturity to the situation?
What's that?
Can you have some maturity about the situation?
I'll just explain all of it next. How's that?
We'll do that on the other side. Kevin and Query, 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
These are the kinds of guys that we want to build this roster and this organization with. So, we're really thrilled with the first round.
Again, I thought that's Rick Carlisle talking about, obviously, Jarace Walker and Ben Sheppard, among others, that the Pacers acquired last night. I thought, Kevin, that it just was really impressive. There were a lot of players that were drafted last night that you could tell that they'd been in the spotlight for a while because they seemed ready for and polished for the moment. If I had to nitpick, I would say this, and I have by nature I nitpick. So let me run you guys something here, and people tell me if I'm out of my mind, which is entirely possible. I get it. It's your night. It's your moment. You want to make a statement. You're getting drafted. It's kind of your branding opportunity, if you will. And probably Grady Dick, because he's a kid that I think he's from Wichita. Maybe he's tried a year ago, not many people knew who he was. I mean, he was a high school basketball star, obviously, but maybe he felt like, hey, I haven't been able to really flash my statement, so this is going to be my night. The jacket that Grady Dick was wearing, which everyone and their brother made fun of. And at first I thought to myself, I'm going to join this fray also. Somebody sent me a thing and said, is he a figure skater in his free time? I thought that was pretty funny. Somebody else said he looked like he was in a show choir, Elton John comparisons. He was wearing, for those that didn't see it, a kind of almost like a double-breasted red sequin jacket. His explanation, which is kind of cool, was, look, I'm from Kansas, and so I wore a jacket that paid tribute to Dorothy's red slippers. Okay.
Hell of a tribute.
It was that. But, he also had on the sunglasses. He didn't get a haircut, which is weird. Like, his hair looks like mine did when I was 12. But when I was 19, Kevin, I was a disaster. My at University of Kansas, for that matter, my freshman ID photo, I'm wearing my hat backwards, my head's cocked back. I mean, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, I can't imagine when I was 19 years old if I was going to be in that spotlight about to get that kind of money. The stuff that I thought was cool at 19. It's why I don't have a tattoo. I don't have a tattoo because I can't think of anything that I would have thought was cool between the ages of 19 and 25 that would still be cool to me today. Having said all of that, and I don't think it was the case, although there were a couple of teams. Where did Grady Dick end up going, like 12 or 13?
Yeah, the NBA shipped him north of the border. They said, we can't have you in the States anymore. You're going to the Raptors.
So there was a lot of talk that he was a guy that was going to be like in the 8 to 11 range. He went 13, which is probably about where he was. But here's my question, and I know I'm going to sound crazy when I say it, and I guess we have the tangible evidence in front of me. The answer is no. But if you were sitting there and you're a general manager and you had been going back and forth and you're like, I really don't know whether or not it's Derek Lively or Grady Dick that I want to take, or Cason Wallace or Grady Dick or whatever it might be. When you see him showing up wearing the big sunglasses indoors and that outfit, in any way, shape, or form, is it a tiebreaker to you where you go, this looks like a guy that just has a Johnny Manziel vibe about him? In any way, shape, or form, in the back of your mind, does that come into play?
I would hope not. I think that's a bit outrageous. I think you could probably point to some other wardrobes in the NBA draft that people maybe turn their head at. I can't imagine Kevin Pritchard sitting there watching the draft thinking, let's change our board because what the guy's wearing tonight.
I'm not saying change the board, but does it? But Kevin, they analyze and scrutinize every single thing about these players.
Have you seen what Tyrese Halliburton has worn to NBA games? I mean, it's some
Fair.
pretty
good point.
Pretty wild stuff. Yeah, I'm not in the let's all of a sudden start evaluating wardrobe for prospects. I actually think Toronto makes some sense. They got a bunch of 6'8" interchangeable dudes. It seems like they could use a shooter to kind of complement Scotty Barnes. We'll see what they do with Anunoby, Siakam, all of that.
People are going to take this, by the way, and as me being like ridiculous. What I'm saying is, I'm not saying that it legitimately hurt him. I'm saying I am curious if it's not in the back of the mind, for a guy to be that like look at me moment. Because again, not the jacket per se, but the vibe in which he went about it with the sunglasses, and he was kind of walking around like he was on a fashion runway. Maybe he's having fun with it, but I get it. It was kind of a fun jacket based on the fact he's from Kansas. He's the guy that I thought that, I mean, when they asked us yesterday who we thought Indiana was going to take, I said Grady Dick. As I explained yesterday, partially because everybody else here said Jarace Walker, and I'm like, okay, I'll go a little outside the box. I like him as a player. I do. I just was curious if quite frankly, and I'll simply say this and then we'll move along. There are players that if they wore the exact same outfit and presented themselves in the exact same fashion but came from a different background would have been absolutely, he got mocked for it for sure, but the character would be questioned a lot more for other players, in my opinion.
I think Jarace Walker press conference this afternoon here in Indy. Hopefully JMV will have him on to round the day out. Something that I think will stand out about Walker, when you look at him, you think, oh my gosh, that's like an NFL body. Like, how is that? Honestly, the player, and I know he's not a big name just yet, but for those that have watched the Detroit Pistons, his body type reminds me a little bit of Isaiah Stewart for the Pistons. And Stewart got into a fight in some game this year, so I don't know, maybe the common fan knows him a little bit more. But when you look at him, I think you just think, wow, that is like a really like big, obviously physically developed dude. But there's a lot of versatility to his game. He pointed out last night, how much his wingspan helps out. I mean, I think he measured like 6'6", 6'7", but the wingspan's 7'2", and he's got a little bit more, I think, just kind of quickness to him to be able to guard multiple spots. Rick Carlisle, I thought, had a great quote last night about it of, that defensive rebounding box is of no worry. The question is, and we think he can get a little bit more there, we think he's got a little bit more offensively than Houston asked him to do or that he showcased in his 1 year at Houston. I think we watched a decent amount of Houston last year. They had two really good guards. Marcus Sasser got drafted last night. They're not a team that scores a ton of points. They didn't shoot the three particularly well as a team. So just in general, they didn't need Walker to do a whole lot on the offensive end of the floor. I think the Pacers are saying, we'll space it a little bit more. Halliburton is obviously a great, great distributor. And if Walker can turn up that three-point shot from like 34%, which is not a horrific number, to 38, 39, then all of a sudden I think you've got a really, really critical piece to this rebuild. I still think even if the jump shot doesn't reach that level, I mean, what was Thaddeus Young, career three-point shooter? Just north of 30?
I was going to say 32, 33.
Yeah,
probably,
so, and he's had a very fine career. So the most important thing, of course, is versatility and rebounding. And if you look at him in the tournament, it was double-digit rebound games. It was a handful of blocks in those moments against Auburn, against Miami as well. And for a team that ranked in the basement of the NBA in those two areas last year and have for the last few years, this is the type of skill set you need to try and continue to complement what you have.
The thing that really stuck out at me about Walker as well, how old is he, Kevin?
I think 19.
Tell me that guy doesn't look 30 years old.
Oh, grown man. Yeah, grown man.
I mean, he looks like a guy like this is a really like.
Yeah, he turns 20 in September.
This is a big time deep cut. Okay, so my apologies on this. Do you know who John Amos is?
Sure.
John Amos is an actor who was most famous for playing the father on Good Times, James on Good Times. Like Jarace Walker looks like if the Pacers were a movie, John Amos would play him. And John Amos, when he was playing the stern, badass dad on Good Times, was like 40. Jarace Walker just looks like, to your point, that is a grown man. That is not a 19-year-old kid.
You want him getting off the bus first.
Undoubtedly.
You want him getting off the bus first.
But you need a guy like that, right? Kind of an enforcer type, right?
And sure, and like just kind of getting away from his look, he plays, I think, in the style that you would want. Enjoy listening to him last night. He talked about his three older sisters, kind of keeping him in line. He actually went to IMG, where Zach Edey went down in Florida. So I think those are some of the pros that you like. Obviously, cons would be, again, can the jump shot be consistent enough? And then, I think some people are curious, like, does he guard wings? Is he the definite, guarder of those guys, or is he guarding a little bit more of kind of the powerful? I would assume, when you play Giannis, that's going to be the assignment now, which I think has been such a question for this franchise. Jake, Pacers that watched last night's draft and walked away thinking, oh boy, that was not a good night for me.
Say that again?
Pacers players that watched last night's draft and thought,
okay,
I didn't like that.
That's a really good question. I would think, actually, if you are Jalen Smith or Isaiah Jackson, you're probably a little bit relieved, right? Because they didn't really address like the outside of Walker, like the 5 area per se. Probably Duarte. I mean, but Duarte felt that way going in, right?
I'd almost be surprised if Duarte's here come July 5th.
I think that's fair.
There's a bit of a logjam of minutes. Again, maybe it's nitpicking a little bit. I thought the Pacers got a little bit like guard heavy in the draft. I would have liked another kind of 3 or 4 because I think there's actually some room there for somebody to potentially make an impact. But the Ben Sheppard pick, again, shot it at a really high level at Belmont. And, mentioned this a little bit earlier. When you think of great shooters, especially at the mid-major level, I tend to think they aren't very good defensively. And he was an all-first team Missouri Valley guy on that end of the floor. And you can never have enough shooting. And with Buddy Hield, he is in a contract year. And I don't think you can just totally ignore that.
By the way, now I'm going to say this and then watch, it'll happen tomorrow. Can we finally put to rest the Buddy Hield and Miles Turner are on their way to L.A. for the Lakers talk? I mean, literally every single time the NBA gets together for a meeting, it's like, by the way, the L.A. Lakers are in pursuit of Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. Wouldn't it have happened by now?
What do you think about next week when free agency begins?
I mean, you're right.
No, I
like I said, it'll probably happen now, right?
I am curious. Like, did last night kind of end the big offseason swings potentially for the Pacers?
Exactly. I mean, it feels that way, does it not?
I mean, you still have 2 first-round picks next year, so you can move that. Obviously, you have some young guys on your roster that if you wanted to, you could move, to your point, Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. I think would be attractive for a variety of reasons to other teams. But it does seem like if they were going to make the big Anunoby, DeAndre Hunter type splash, you would have seen it last night with the 7th pick.
Kevin, I love where they are right now. I love it because we don't know if Jarace Walker can play. We don't know that. But if he can,
I feel pretty good he can help you out in the areas of weakness.
Yeah, he's 19. Tyrese Halliburton is what, 22? Ben Matherin's 21. Isaiah Jackson's like 20 or 21. Jalen Smith is, the number of players they have under the age of like 24.
Yeah, I'd throw Nembhard in there before
Nembhard,
Jackson and Smith.
Yeah, Nembhard, of course. Aaron Nesmith, right? And then you have the opportunity for 2 more of them next year, if you so choose. I love where the Pacers are.
Yeah, I think they're in a great spot.
Because there's also, and I give Kevin Pritchard, Chad Buchanan, Rick Carlisle a ton of credit here. A ton. They sat here almost exactly a year ago and said, listen, it's going to be rough sledding here. We need you to be on board with it. We need you to understand where we're coming from. We need you to be patient with us. And then they saw, like, wait a minute, these guys actually played pretty well together, and we might be ahead of schedule. And so then they said, you know what, we have something here. Let's build on this and let's go. And the period of ambiguity and uncertainty for the Pacers was not very long before all of a sudden do you remember in the mid-90s there was a bit of a craze, like at kiosks in the mall for a short while, of the art where There was a whole Seinfeld episode about it. I know I'm dating references here, but the artwork that you'd have to sit there and stare at for like 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden it would come into view and it would be like a 3-dimensional image. I don't know if you guys remember what I'm talking about, but they were all the craze for a while there. You'd buy them in the mall and it'd say, "Go Colts" or whatever, but you couldn't see it at first, and then once your eyes saw it, you couldn't unsee it. That's what the Pacers in the last year have looked like. At first, they basically said to everybody, like, look, we have this like uncertain piece of artwork that we're just going to stare at and kind of see how it comes into form. And then, boom, it popped into view, and you could see the vision very clearly. Halliburton's the guy you're building around. Mathurin is the guy that's going to be his running mate. That's his Robin, et cetera, et cetera. And it's there now. You can see it.
Yeah, the puzzle pieces are starting to be pretty crystal clear.
Totally agree.
Magic Eye, is that what you're talking about?
Is that what it was called?
Where you, like, pulled your eyes away?
Yeah, it was like an 8x12 piece of paper. You just had to sit there and stare at it, it's like you got to look through it, and then all of a sudden,
ringing a bell for me.
It would kind of come into view.
Oh, I see the bunny. I'm like, I don't see it.
Yes, that's
I
exactly
see the
right.
bunny.
Yeah.
I see some people, trying to make the comparison to David West with Jarace Walker. I get like the 6'8", 6'9" toughness factor, but I do think they're very different players. I think at times, you thought David West was, maybe liability's too harsh, but I don't think we talked about David West as a great defensive player. I think Walker, you talk about a guy that can be a versatile defensive player. And to be fair to West was a really good NBA scorer.
Well, yeah, he was.
This dude averaged 19 and 20 a game for good New Orleans teams, and even here. I mean, you talk about a go-to guy late. We're not there yet with Walker. I mean, I always go back to that Hawks series, Pacers-Hawks series, when things were bleak at times in that series, and it could have been a big upset. And you threw the ball into the adult David West late in those games, and you just said, all is good in the world. We're not there yet with Walker. And I think Rick Carlisle's comments said that. He's got a good feel offensively. He's a good passer. He's a good cutter. Again, Houston did not ask him to do a whole lot offensively. They feel like they get that jump shot a little bit tighter, and he can help you out there. But his calling card is on that defensive end. That's why I kind of think Thad Young. I know body type is not exactly Thad Young, but when I think of Thad, I think defense before offense. When I think of David West, I think offense before defense.
Agree totally. Yeah, that's fair. Fair way of saying it. Chad Buchanan, by the way, going to join us in the 9 o'clock hour. A couple of questions, including the intangibles of how you make a trade, like in between.
Yeah,
picks.
I am curious about that.
Yeah, we'll get into all that later.
Goal since I was like 5 years old to get to the NBA. So fast forward to me having to pick a college. Knowing Coach Woodson, him being a player and a coach, that was definitely one of the main reasons. And then once I met him, he was just even a better person. So it was just genuine, and for sure, definitely him having that NBA experience definitely drew me to Indiana.
Let me tell you how times have changed a little bit in college basketball, and Indiana is a great representation of that. Okay, let me read you a text message. That was Jalen Hood-Schifino, by the way, who was drafted last night by the Lakers, talking about Mike Woodson's role in his development as a player. We got this text. Hey, guys, while watching the draft last evening, after Michigan had 2 players selected in the top 15, but was nothing more than a mediocre Big Ten team who missed the NCAA and I believe was knocked out in the NIT, it shows the NBA draft has nothing to do with actual basketball production. And with Trayce Jackson-Davis going as the second-to-last pick after being thought to be borderline first or second round, does that all but seal Edey's NBA chances next season? You're better being a 6'7" wing player with 7-foot wingspan who has little to no shot. Here's the thing. For years, the answer to that question is this. The NBA game and the college game are just different. They just are. They're both basketball, I realize, but the style of play, totally different. And for years, the narrative, in particular for Indiana basketball, do you know how many players Bob Knight coached that started an NBA All-Star game? One. 29 years at Indiana, 1 NBA All-Star. And people used to chatter about that. And I always said, Bob Knight's job is to make the best college basketball team for Indiana University. Bob Knight's job is not to develop the Atlanta Hawks or the Phoenix Suns. It's to win basketball games for Indiana University. And that was true for a very long time in terms of just the approach. Dean Smith had, good Lord, I mean, you couldn't swing a dead cat in Chapel Hill and not hit like 3 first-round picks. And Dean Smith, who was a hell of a coach, won 2 titles in 40 years or whatever. I think now in college basketball, because the NBA has become and a huge part of it is because of obviously Bird and Magic and Jordan and just the evolution of the popularity and the money and everything of the NBA. That's what guys are focused on at a very young age. And college basketball to the upper echelon elite is a springboard to help get them to the NBA. So for a long time, blue chip marquee players, college basketball was the first opportunity they had to show people they were a blue chip marquee player, and so therefore they wanted to go somewhere that was going to give them prominence by winning a lot of games as a college basketball team. Now, blue chip marquee players are playing in AAU tournaments and on national television and web pages and everything else by the time they're 16 or 17. So the college game is nothing more than a one-year springboard for them. So that changes a little bit the dynamic of the recruiting of players. And as you can see there, Mike Woodson's connection to the NBA is a huge caveat towards getting great players there. But in the end, Kevin, Mike Woodson's job is still to win games for Indiana University. And there is a very fine balancing act between
tough to achieve that.
Yeah, getting those players and then winning with them, as we saw last night, as evidenced by the point about Michigan.
I mean, I would argue that a guy that's struggling with it right now, considering the amount of 5-star recruits he brings in on an annual basis, is John Calipari.
100%. And what did they say last night about Calipari? They're like, look, a lot of these guards that you see in the NBA from Kentucky that are becoming great players weren't necessarily great players at Kentucky.
How about last night? Kentucky has Oscar Tshiebwe go undrafted. That is the National Player of the Year from 2 years ago. A walking double-double, 17 and 13, 17 and 14. I mean, big double-double nights on a night-in, night-out basis. Chris Livingston gets drafted out of Kentucky, and he averaged 6 and 4 last year. So the guy that was one of the most productive players college basketball has seen in years does not get drafted. But the guy that averaged 6 and 4 does get drafted. Or I guess in Trayce's case. I mean, again, Trayce was the second to last pick of the NBA draft, and he's one of the most productive players that program has ever seen. Obviously, one of the most dominant players in college basketball last season. But I do think from a Jalen Hood-Schifino standpoint to the Lakers and a Trayce Jackson-Davis standpoint to the Warriors, those are great landing spots. And I think remove yourself from like the LeBron, Steph Curry hype for a second. Those teams have massive payrolls and have to have some rookies fit in somewhere. So just given that, they walk into really good situations. And then, of course, I think a guy like Hood-Schifino, I think would be a nice compliment to what the Lakers kind of have. And we talked about it a lot earlier. You look at Golden State's roster, nobody's over 6'9". Nobody. Mike Dunleavy, their GM, said it last night. Trayce Jackson-Davis got a good chance to be on our 15-man roster. Jake, there's not a lot of second-round picks that the GM say that after the draft. So I think it's a great, great landing spot for both of them. And I know Trayce is probably pretty mad about how much he fell and all of that, and clearly his social media indicates some of that. But that is a place where they're going to need him to come in, and I would think potentially, round out that back of the second unit depending on how the rest of the offseason goes.
You know what's interesting? If you look at the last, 10 guys that have been named an NBA Finals MVP. So the last, and I'm not talking about the last 10 years, but the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Of the last 9 players that have been an NBA Finals Most Valuable Player, of those 9, 1, 2, 3 of them, 4 of the 9 played college basketball, even played college basketball. And Kawhi Leonard was at San Diego State. Andre Iguodala was kind of I hate to say an obscure NBA Finals MVP, but Kevin Durant played 1 year, and Steph Curry obviously had the one good run at Davidson. Outside of that, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Dirk Nowitzki, Giannis, Jokic. So my point being, the college game is an indicator, or it gives you a chance to see players, but it is not the immediate link towards NBA success and vice versa.
The second time in NBA history of the first 5 picks, only one collegian.
Yeah.
I thought I saw last night.
I think they did say that, yeah.
You go back to the Kwame Brown, Eddie Curry, Tyson Chandler. I'm trying to think who else would have been in that draft. Now, obviously, it's changed from the high school, tune to that draft, whatever that was, 2001, to certainly some international flavor. And I guess last night with the Thompson brothers, that's a pretty unique case of both of them playing for overtime elite. Mark, you did a poll last night asking for a letter grade for the Pacers?
Yeah, so they landed Jarace Walker with the trade with the Wizards, but we still didn't know the compensation. We knew there was 2 second-round picks. We know if they were 2028 or later that night, so I didn't add that caveat. But again, Twitter only allows 4-letter grade options, so I went with A, B, C, or F, because D's a failing grade too. Who are we kidding? So I asked Pacers fans, what's your grade for landing Jarace Walker? Overwhelmingly, over 860 votes and counting, 54.6% say A grade. B is second spot with 30.6%, C 9.4%, and F 5.3%. Some comments in there. Someone said, getting him with 2 picks, chef's kiss emoji. Whether he was the best player available or not, I think he filled the biggest need. You get the guy you want plus picks, masterclass.
Yeah, and I want to go back to, I think by now once the knee-jerk dust has settled on this, people have figured this out. But I understand, especially people that are not as diehard or peripheral fans may not understand this. So let me explain again what took place. The Pacers were on the clock at number 7. Washington was immediately behind them at number 8. Washington really liked the point guard out of France that had played with Wembanyama, okay? And Washington wanted to take that player. San Antonio, because they already have Wembanyama, really liked the idea of being able to pair him with his point guard that he had played with in France. So San Antonio, either fictionally or factually, calls Indiana and says, hey, our guy's on the board here at 7, and we really like him. We'd like to talk to you about possibly trading into your position at number 7. And Indiana says, well, what do you have to offer? And San Antonio makes an offer. So the Pacers then tell Washington, listen, we know you like this guy at 7, and we're sitting at 7 right now, and it's true. We're probably going to take Jarace Walker, and then you would be able to just take your guy at 8. Except we're now getting offers, and we're contemplating it. So what do you have to give us?
Do you think teams lie about that?
Yes.
Prove it.
Of course,
show me.
Would lie about it. Yeah.
Show me.
So,
You know,
so Washington says, you know what, we guys, we got to do this. What do we have to give to Indiana so we can move up one spot? So they say, we'll give you a couple of future second-round picks. And Indiana says, sounds good. Now, it's very easy for a Pacer fan to say, well, what the hell good does that do? A couple of 2028 second-round picks? Who cares? That's 4 years from now. Here's where it makes a difference. And especially when you are a mid-market team like Indiana, you've got to be careful about money in every aspect of the word, more so than in L.A. or New York or Miami. Where it makes a difference is the rookie salary structures of NBA players are set in stone based on where they're drafted. And by drafting Jarace Walker 8th as opposed to 7th, the Pacers save themselves like $580,000 a year. The guy that gets completely screwed is Jarace Walker.
Right. Yeah, I know. If you're his agent, you're like, come on, Pacers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was I think the rage last night from Pacers fans when they saw this news was maybe more confusion than anything.
Totally.
Because to me, I was just like, oh, this makes total sense. Like, great job. I mean, you get a couple second-round picks, you save a little money. Yeah, you still get the guy that you wanted. All of those things for me kind of checked out. A little bit more on Ben Sheppard. Again, Ben Sheppard was the pick at 26 overall. Hails from Belmont, played there for all 4 years. He had 41 in a game a couple of years ago, 35 and 33 in games this past season. 41% from 3 in his senior year, 37% overall. Definitely improved his shooting as his career moved along at Belmont. By all accounts, had a really good combine. That's when he kind of emerged a little bit more as a late first-round guy. And just a couple of thoughts. You know, I mentioned yesterday, Jake, I should say for about the past week, you know, question I've asked some of our guests, what's the second need? We know defense is the first need, wing defense. What's that second need? And I do think it was shooting. It was making sure you continue to put shooting around Halliburton and Nembhard, you know, kind of your point guards of the future. And Buddy Hield is in a contract year. I still think he can be a very important piece for you for several more years, but you can't ignore that. And so I think that's where Sheppard comes into play. It's something that I think you like. I don't think this is a guy that is a menacing defender or this, you know, 1% athlete by any means, but he was a first-team all-defense guy in the MoVal. So it's not like he's just an outright liability by any means on the defensive end of the floor. And I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about Belmont, but the few times I've watched them over the years, I think they have this reputation of some really, really smart dudes that know how to play. And when you've got Halliburton and you know how to move off the ball and you know how to cut, Halliburton's finding you. So Sheppard checked that box for me of, okay, that was probably the second need. I see the thought process in that. If I'm Chris Duarte, though, I don't like that.
Do you remember, and he's stuck around for a long time, and actually J.J. Redick referenced him last night in some sort of conversation about pieces or, you know, whatever. Do you remember George Niang?
Oh, sure. My brother-in-law has a George Niang Hickory jersey.
That was fun doing overnights and trying to figure out how you said his last name for the morning sportscast.
Well, you could, Mark, you could struggle with the first name, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it George or George?
I think singular.
He's done a nice job of sticking around as an NBA player. Now, he does look like a guy.
Right?
He's with Philly now. He definitely looks like a guy that as soon as he's done playing, he's gonna look like Sinbad within 2 years of finishing playing. But he is a spot-up shooter, and he's managed to last in the league because he can shoot when the ball rotates over to him. If he's got a window, he can shoot and he can score. Sheppard, I think, is a better player than that and a more versatile player than that. But that's the kind of player where, like, there's not a big wave when you sign him, but, like, here it is 12 years later, and he's still in the league because he can shoot the basketball. That's what you hope for Sheppard, right? That he is a guy that in the second unit, when the ball rotates over and he's out there on the floor, that he can extend the defense a little bit. And maybe that frees things up a little bit more for, that second unit for some of the guys that are going to be playing a little bit further down low.
Yeah, I mean, Nembhard, I don't think you're calling him some dead-eye shooter.
Correct.
McConnell, I don't think you call him that either. So to me, that makes some sense. Got a text here from Steve Jake. Steve is at his lake house for the weekend and sent us a picture of us on the TV here via the old YouTube stream.
How about that, man?
Shout out to Steve. Hopefully he's getting a little insight on the Pacers draft.
Instead of being near the water, he just you can't pull away from us, right?
Yeah, early in the morning here. Quick little recap of the 2 second-round picks for the Pacers. Mojave King. Jake, you've already made one desert joke. We'll see if you got anything else.
He rules the desert, yep.
For Mojave King, a New Zealand native, played last year for G League Ignite. I think there are some questions about his jump shots. 6'4" guard. Seems pretty athletic, though, if you're going to go for kind of a strength there, known more for his defense. This screams kind of two-way contract to me, so I would assume a lot of Mad Ant action for Mr. Mojave King. Ironically, he actually played in a tournament with Benedict Mathurin at one point in his prep career, both of them NBA Academy products, Latin America for Mathurin, obviously not Latin America for Mojave King. And then at number 55 overall to round out the night, another two guard, which again, if I'm going to nitpick a little bit too two guard heavy, I would have liked to have seen another wing or even kind of a 4 in there. But Isaiah Wong, the ACC Player of the Year, IU fans will certainly remember that name from the tournament. 27 points Isaiah Wong had against Indiana.
Are you now listen, I think it's a sign of my maturity, and both of you should be commending that for the fact that we are now 79 and a half minutes into this program this morning. And Indiana, late last night, and I'm working on no sleep, right? I mean, no sleep, because I watched the draft. My buddy Frank yesterday says to me at the gym, "You going to watch the draft tonight? Because if not, I'm going to call in and say that you were not legit." And I said, "No, I'm watching it." I texted him last night, late second round, still watching. I'm all in. He said, "Okay, good. I'm glad you pass." So
it is our job.
It is. So I was up late watching the draft because, to your point, Kevin, it ended at like close to 1 o'clock in the morning.
I know I praised the NBA for the quickness of the draft. I felt it was a little slow.
I was cursing your name last night. Like, Kevin said this was going to be fast. I'm going to bed. I can't stay up past
I think the
midnight
ESPN
now.
product made it feel slow.
Totally agree. A lot of pregnant pauses. And the Pacers are on the clock. Trayce Jackson-Davis is there. They go with Isaiah Wong of Miami, who knocked Indiana out of the tournament in not just knocked them out of the tournament, like walloped them out of the tournament.
KO'd them.
Went to the Final Four. And Trayce Jackson-Davis has to slide down to the second to last pick of the draft. Washington technically on its way to Golden State. Trayce Jackson-Davis sent a tweet saying, like, "You all will regret this, I promise." Pacer fans up in arms. Can't believe they didn't take Trayce Jackson-Davis. 4-year player, Mr. Basketball, all-time leading rebounder and shot blocker in Indiana history. One of the top 5 scorers, probably would have broken Calvert Chaney's career scoring record if he'd come back, granted 5 years versus 4. At no point, now 80 minutes into this program this morning, at no point did I say Indiana fans think the Pacers made the Wong decision. I never have said that.
All right! That was a 5-minute story that was the most obvious punchline coming.
I thought there was a chance you might just turn off the mic kind of mid-story and just hope Jake was talking to himself.
Hey, Jake, Ben Sheppard's a real deal. Saw him play against Indiana State twice this year, and he does not miss. Great pick.
Yeah, I mean, there's some high praise for kind of his movement off the ball, his ability to catch and shoot, running off screens, all of that. And, again, a big combine for Sheppard. So you take chances on guys that, again, excel in that area with how the modern game is. Defense was still the first focus, and understandably with Jarace Walker coming there at number, I guess, technically 8 overall. But Sheppard at 26 I thought was important as well. Anything else draft-wise? Brandon Miller going 2. I feel like that made sense to me with how Charlotte is currently built. Do we think Scoot Henderson and Damian Lillard are together, or is this Damian Lillard on the move?
I think, and I'll tell you the other player you forget about in there is Shaedon Sharpe,
who had a really nice close.
He did.
To his
he
season.
looks like he's going to be a player too. I think it is. Look, this guy was too good to pass up, and we'll figure out a way to make it work. Damian Lillard's.
Yeah, there's a huge drop, I think, from 3 to 4 if you look at the prospects.
Oh, yeah.
So
Lillard, I think, is, I think they know he's probably entering the final phase, but it's a nice handoff at that point if you want to do it that way. I think Scoot Henderson, you just take him and you go, we'll figure out how to make it work. I did Brandon Miller, I thought was, first off, I loved his suit. I thought his suit was beautiful, honest, and I'm being serious. I was like, that is a gorgeous suit. But Brandon Miller, first time I've really seen him interviewed, I thought he came off really well-spoken guy, and by that I mean sounded humble and polite, kind. I was a little hesitant when I can't remember who was interviewing Brandon Miller, and they said, now in terms of for the Hornets, if you were to tell their fans, what do you bring? I'm like, it's probably the wrong terminology for Brandon Miller.
That was a popular question last night.
Yeah.
I didn't understand hey, Scoot, why did you hug all 7 of your siblings? Well, because they're his family members.
I thought that as well. I thought that as well. What's he supposed to do?
I hate to be overly critical of people in media settings because Lord knows I'm never going to be sitting on an NBA draft couch interviewing prospects.
That was the first question, wasn't it?
But I'm kind of like, well,
I've asked
to be fair, that many siblings, there's probably a turd in that punch bowl somewhere.
I've asked some
really
dumb questions before.
But you're hugging everybody. I saw Jaime Jaquez was hugging whoever the coach was at the table next to him. Like,
here's the most sobering thing. The most sobering thing is while we're watching the draft, I think it's actually when Jaime is it Jaquez?
I believe so.
When he was in, and his parents were both up there and they're being interviewed, and Shannon looks at me and goes, do you realize that so far we are older than every parent that they've interviewed so far? And I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Cam Whitmore's slide.
I was going to say, that was the other thing I was going to bring up. Cam Whitmore, was it 20?
20 to the Rockets, yeah.
I mean, if you were the Rockets, you literally walked out of the draft with Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore, and I'm willing to bet there were times throughout the draft process that Cam Whitmore was mocked to the Rockets at number 4.
Yeah.
So medicals with him?
Is that what it was?
Said, I thought. Yeah.
I mean, he only missed a handful of games at Villanova.
I thought they said he didn't interview well.
That's interesting. That will be one to watch. And again, if you're Houston, you're in a position where it's like, all right, you take a chance. I mean, you're in a full rebuild, and he's a great talent, and you got Thompson at 4. That one made a whole lot of sense to me. I know there were some Pacers fans that wanted to see them try and trade up for Whitmore.
Part of the reason that it was surprising to see Whitmore, or to hear that like there could have been an issue in his interview process, is because I do think that the program that he's coming out of is one that is reputed to have kind of just a scrupulous and professional nature about it that would have prepared him. But I agree with Neil on this, by the way. Jake, can we please retire the "how excited are you" question? I mean, can you imagine one of these guys like, well, actually, 2 years ago, I was super nervous that whether or not somebody was going to go to prom with me, and I remember scrounging to be able and having to borrow money to be able to rent a tux for the prom, and now I'm probably going to make sign a shoe contract next week for $5 million, and then I'm getting $800,000 a year, and I'm in the NBA, but I'm not excited at all. This sucks.
Well, it's the same with the parent questions. Like, what do you think?
How proud are you of your son?
Well, I wanted some parents just be like, he's a bum. He doesn't do anything. You guys got fleeced right now.
There is an element of like, I'm just there to kind of see their emotion, and so I guess any question is gonna lead to any sort of emotion in that setting. I don't think you're gonna get a lot of these just like incredible answers there. Again, I thought a lot of that stuff could have been moved to the ABC telecast. Not to get too into the weeds of like media and everything, but when the NFL does the ABC broadcast for the draft, they tend to preface it by, this is for the casual fan. This is to watch maybe with the family a little bit more. You're going to get to know the human element of these prospects a little bit more, whereas the NFL Network feed or the ESPN feed is a little bit more for analysis. I'm watching the ESPN feed last night, and they're barely using J.J. Redick, and I think Redick is outstanding talking basketball. I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, you want to know how the draft affects the player's family? Watch ABC. You want to know how the draft affects the team? Watch ESPN. That's how it should be.
And I get there's a little bit of balance. You obviously want to get to know some of these prospects, and I'm good with it. But I thought it was a little bit too much human element and not enough, basketball analysis. And again, I pretty much was ESPN throughout. Who was the ABC telecast? Did any of you watch it?
No,
Stephen A?
I only watched ESPN. I didn't see who else was there.
I assume it was Stephen A. and company.
By the way, before we get to the check down, apparently with Cam Whitmore's cartilage issues in his knee, they thought that could be an issue further on. Somebody also said, can you please cover what the Pacers got for the 29th pick?
So Denver, that trade?
Yes.
Okay, so they traded 29 and 32. This would have been on what, Tuesday or Wednesday?
Correct. Earlier this week.
Yeah, and they got the 40th pick originally from Denver. They actually moved that to the 47th pick. They got $4 million in cash from the Lakers to move back 7 spots. The big return on that trade was a 2024 first-round pick, courtesy of Denver. The parameters of that pick, though, depend on 4 teams next year. I believe it's Houston, Utah, OKC, and the Clippers. Whichever team has the worst record of those 4, they'll get that draft pick. I know that's confusing. If you base that off of this year's standings, the Pacers would have got the 20th pick. So basically, they moved back 8 spots in the second round. They are hoping to move up about 8 spots in round 1 if you look at where 29 and where 32 were originally. I said on yesterday's show, I was a big fan of that move. I think it's important to continue to have some future draft picks in the cupboard because there's going to be a point in time as a franchise where you don't want to spend all the draft picks. You don't want to keep on acquiring them all. At some point, you're going to want to trade that pick for a player. And now the Pacers, I think, have got a little bit of ammo moving forward, which as cap space gets tighter, as your roster becomes a little bit more win now, those are important to continue to have.
Time for the morning check down, by the way.
The morning check down. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Staring at me like I got ants coming out of my ears.
Well,
I'm like, what do you want?
The headphone jack that I have here, if I hear what goes like that, if I want to hear that, then it's this. Or I can listen to it where I can just hear the 3 of us. So
Sounds like a you problem.
You had some ants issues this morning, correct?
Oh, my God. I walked out on the front porch, and there's like thousands of really tiny ants just like running. I'm like, what the blue hell?
Big ants?
There's not a piece of bread or anything out on there. I'm like, what is going on here? I went through like a half bottle of Raid. So
now why? They're not bothering you.
I don't want them getting in the house.
Granted, like I told you earlier, I'd move. Major League Baseball, we'll start with that. Braves over the Phillies 5-1. It was the Diamondbacks over the Nationals 5-3. Athletics beaten by the Guardians 6-1. Padres over the Giants 10-0. The New York Yankees beaten by the Mariners 10-2. By the way, the Cubs and Cardinals in London and the Reds and Braves in Cincinnati sold out the next 2 games.
All eyes on it
from you. Great restraint from you. The Cubs and Cardinals are in London. You didn't do an accent. We'll just move on.
They're the best friends I've ever seen.
One thing I did want to clarify, I think I might have misspoke there on the parameters for that 2024 first-round pick. It should be the Pacers will get in return whichever of those 4 teams has the worst selection. So whichever of those teams has the best record next year out of Houston, Utah, OKC, and the Clippers, whichever team has the lowest first-round pick. So whichever's closest to round 2, that is the selection the Pacers will get in that trade. Last night, from a sport viewing standpoint outside of the draft, I was getting a lot of people that were like, this College World Series game was just an old-fashioned pitcher's duel. ESPN had a wild stat on the College World Series from last night. So Rhett Lauder, Paul Skeens, both top 15 picks projected coming up in the Major League Baseball draft. They're starting last night. It's the first College World Series game with aluminum bats, which have been in place since '74, where both starters went at least 7 innings and allowed 3 hits or less.
I mean,
that's wild.
Didn't they say going into it was going to be like the 2,
lived up to the hype.
Yeah, total pitcher's duel, right?
What, 40, 50 some years, and we have not seen both starters go at least 7 and allow 3 hits or less.
Do you remember?
It was LSU on a walk-off, by the way. Tommy Tanks in the 11th with a shot to left field.
Do you remember a couple of years ago, I say couple, like 10 years ago during the Little League World Series, there was the one kid during the intro that said all he does is hit dingers?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that Tommy Tanks now?
I think that's the guy that said he had a crush on his teacher, too. Good job by him.
I like when Mrs. Jones subs.
That kid would now be like Tommy Tanks' age, right?
Tommy Tanks certainly plays like it.
And he looks like Tommy Tanks looks like that kid, right?
I thought he was a fullback for Brian Kelly this past year.
Well, it's all in the family, as you know.
LSU and Florida, best of 3 series for it all, starting tomorrow night.
Hi, my name's Alfred D'Elia. At home, they call me Big Al, and I hit dingers.
That was a strong pull there, Mark. By the way,
really quick, Mark.
NBA news above and beyond the NBA draft. The Chicago Bulls expect Lonzo Ball to miss yet another entire season. Have you seen reports, and I don't know if this is conjecture or legit, but I have seen reports that they believe that, because is it a knee or an ankle with Lonzo Ball? Do you know, Mark?
It's the knee now. Yeah, he's got the same issue, but in the different knee.
So this seems to be an easy target. I did read somewhere that they thought it might have been because of his imbalance that was created by wearing that shoe that he had the first year that he was playing in the league.
So it's all physical, Mark?
So he had surgery to fix the issue, and then he was still feeling pain, and now I guess he's feeling pain in the other knee as well, and they think it's the same issue.
It really is too
it's
bad.
It's been like
because,
3 years now.
You know, Lonzo Ball, as big as a pain in the backside as his dad was.
It's fun to watch.
He's a great player, I think. I think he is fun to watch. He dictates pace like nobody's business in the NBA. Ben Simmons is the only other player I can think of that can dictate pace like that. But the other thing, too, is as much as LeVar Ball was in your face on ESPN and doing, he was kind of a PR nightmare. My understanding is, especially at UCLA, that Lonzo Ball was a great teammate and his dad was completely hands off. It was like, and LaMelo Ball's a great player.
Lonzo Ball has undergone 3 operations on his left knee in a little more than a year.
Yeah,
still got pain in it.
That's rough.
That is. Fever won last night in Seattle. Big night for Kelsey Mitchell as they begin a 4-game road trip. When we come back, we'll continue to get more into the draft, explain where the 2 guys from Indiana went last night, and a look at the 4 picks for the Pacers. What type of letter grade would you give them? Chad Buchanan, by the way, in about an hour, Pacers GM, going to join us to close out the show today. Kevin and Query right here on a Friday, 93.5, 107.5. One spot, got a couple second rounders, saved a little money, and still took the guy that they were going to take at 7. That would be Jarace Walker out of Houston. I think Carlisle laid it out there pretty accurately. This is a team that was horrid on defense and rebounding last season. That was the focus. That is Walker's calling card as a 240-pound dude with a 7'2" wingspan. But offensively, this is not some major liability. Questions about his jump shot, certainly. But, 34% is not god-awful. And they feel like that his feel as a passer and a cutter and his ability to kind of do some other things makes this selection not some guy that you're only, he only helps us out on one end of the floor. He can be helpful on the offensive end of the floor, but there's certainly room for him to grow a little bit more as an offensive player.
The buzz aside from the X's and O's and everything else of the draft, we talked about Grady Dick's jacket, which, again, I thought it looked ridiculous, but whatever. I love Brandon Miller's suit. Anybody else jump out at you from a fashion standpoint?
I don't know about fashion-wise. I did, and it probably helped that Maddie was sitting next to me when it happened. I don't know if we have made enough about twins being drafted number 4 and 5 overall.
Unbelievable, right?
I thought Scoot Henderson's outfit was going to take an eye out.
Yeah, Scoot did have big chain for Scoot there.
Now, the chain thing, let's get to that. I think they gave that to everybody, right?
Oh, did they?
I noticed. So Grady
Dick.
Dick,
One I noticed it on.
Grady Dick had on this big silver chain with his logo. I guess I should have elaborated earlier when I was talking about how, at first, when I first saw Grady Dick's outfit, I saw a video that was posted where he was explaining his outfit, and then he's like, "Yeah, I got my necklace here," and he's like, "with my new logo." And I just thought, okay, this has red flags. This looks like, me, right? And I told you that when I watched him play, I thought there were times where he took plays off because he was kind of sulking. So maybe I had a preconceived notion in my head. But then I noticed throughout the draft that every player had that. And I think they gave every player a necklace to wear with their initials on it. That seemed to be the theme for everybody that was there. But the Thompson twins, not just a great band from the 80s, but I thought, Kevin, the thing about the Thompson twins that impressed me, they looked to me the most just professional approach in their attire. And then I got to thinking about it. If you were a player about to be drafted in the NBA, what would you wear? What would your outfit be?
I didn't realize you're this big of a fashionista.
I'm not.
Project Runway on in your house?
I'm not a fashionista, but I'm fascinated. But I am a 19-year-old, 20-year-old me. Ista.
What do you think of Marty Smith's shave in the back of the head, and when they went to him in San Antonio, that was quite the
cut off shorts.
First off, okay, let's talk about that too. When they went to Marty Smith in San Antonio, I felt bad for him first off because he was like, "Why am I doing this?" But
then he looked at his paycheck.
Could they not have gotten his microphone correct? You couldn't hear him for the first. Did you notice that?
Well, I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to do it where he was not only broadcasting on TV, but
to the crowd,
playing it over the loudspeaker.
But you couldn't hear him at all because the crowd was going bonkers, and just was that whole thing was just kind of awkward, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the hell I would wear.
When you were 19, because
a suit that fits.
When I was 19, I would have dressed like a total jackass, I'll bet you. I remember my senior year of high school, Chris Farkas was going to Alabama.
Bingo card.
And he shaved Bama into the back of his head, and then Byron shaved an IU logo into the back of his head. And I think I got a Kansas Jayhawk earring at one point. Just terrible decisions all the way around. And I'm like, I wonder what I would have done that's why I wanted to make fun of Grady Dick, how ridiculous he looked. But I have to admit, 19-year-old me, I would have walked out there dressed like Vanilla Ice.
You probably did.
I would have looked like a total moron when I was 19. But you're entering into the professional world. And I thought the Thompsons I just thought So many of those players last night, to me, I was so impressed by the way they handled themselves and the maturity they showed.
Yeah,
Far greater than the maturity I had at that age.
Jarace Walker, press conference a little bit later this afternoon. Hopefully he'll join JMV as well. I think you'll enjoy listening to him. Ben Sheppard, a lot of energy from him. Pretty outgoing guy, it seems like, as well. Again, Jarace Walker, for those that missed it last night, grew up in Pennsylvania. Went to IMG Academy, actually went there for 5 years. Spent a lot of time down in Bradenton, Florida, at their academy. Teammate of Zach Edey at one point. I know IMG's got a couple teams down there, but was a teammate of Zach Edey there. And he is the youngest of 3 older sisters. They briefly showed them after the selection there. You know, whoa.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't see it, so I'm just guessing.
Jeez, God. Well, the 3 girls, I mean, I don't know. They had to be somewhat good
One
looking.
might have been passable, I would assume.
Passable?
Yeah.
Boy. Yeah. Mark, the father of 3 daughters, dropping a passable line there. I do think the fact that this is a 5-star prospect that decided to go play for Kelvin Sampson at Houston. I mean, I could think of a lot of places I would want to play before playing for Kelvin. Kelvin Sampson strikes me as a dude that I would want no part of those practices.
Kelvin Sampson was there last night too, right? Front and center. I mean,
Marcus
good for him.
Sasser drafted as well in round 1, but I just think Walker strikes me as a guy that's kind of wired in the mindset that fits his style as a defender and a rebounder first, more than anything.
You know, Kelvin Sampson, Kevin, is a very easy target. He was, when Kelvin Sampson coached Indiana, he was the most arrogant, he was just an ass all the way around to people. He was arrogant as could be. We know what happened with all of that. I don't have to sit here and go over the history of Kelvin Sampson with Indiana. All of that said, he is a fabulous basketball coach. And if you're going to play for Kelvin Sampson, you are going to your point, Kevin, you are going to be a bulldog on defense first and foremost, and you are going to give 150%.
We had this question leading into the draft, and we got an answer on it last night. Biggest swing or best fit? And the Pacers went best fit. You know, biggest swing probably would have been the guy they actually took.
Yeah, you're right.
You know,
you're right.
as just the high intrigue and high upside.
Would that have been biggest
him.
swing or biggest risk?
Both. I think both.
Like upside?
Fit. Yeah, swing and upside, boom or bust, however you want to label it. I think that's what Washington, and look at Washington. I mean, they are in a position right now to take a player like that. But I think, in a way, and someone tweeted this at me a little bit earlier, and I think it's true, what you saw last night, and we'll see how the next week unfolds. I don't expect anything massive from the Pacers, but they still could do something of significance. I think it's a sign, Jake, that they look at Tyrese Halliburton and Benedict Mather and they say, guys, lead us. Score. Score and lead. You two score and lead. Because the Walker pick is not 19 a game guy. Nembhard is not 19 a game guy.
Right.
You know, it is Halliburton and Mather and show, and everybody compliments those two. I was under that impression before the draft. I agree with that thought process, but last night confirmed it. Because they could have gone to Cam Whitmore.
You're right.
They could have gone with, again.
I mean, Walker was the one.
The Bilal guy. Some might say Taylor Hendricks, who went to pick, 2 picks after the Pacers. I guess technically 1 pick after the Pacers. That he has a little bit more offensive upside.
Hendricks is interesting to me, Kevin, because he's the guy that you heard nothing about last night in the draft. You know, he got picked and it was kind of like, okay, yeah, great. And then there wasn't a lot of analysis about him. But I thought he was pretty intriguing. Somebody asked me this question. I think it's a good one. Mark, I'll use it in the form of you, Mark. We'll begin with you.
I'll see if this is flattering or not.
Let's say that you are 19 years old.
Passable, to use a term from Mark.
You're 19 years old and you are in the green room. You've got your suit on. Your mom's there. Your dad. You have a brother and a sister, right?
No, I have 2 brothers.
Okay, so your whole family's there. And Adam Silver gets up and says, with the 7th pick or whatever pick, the insert name of team, select Mark Dykton from the University of Indianapolis. What franchise? What franchise, when he says it right before your name, even though you're thrilled to be going into the NBA, what franchise is the one that when you put the hat on, you're like, oh man. Like, I got a grin here.
I know they had a good year this year, but the Sacramento Kings probably.
Where's the income tax the highest?
California's way up there.
I saw they
New York
mentioned
also?
They mentioned that with the Thompson brothers. One of them went to Houston, the other one went to Detroit. Is that right?
Detroit, yeah.
So the Detroit one, I think it's 4.5% income tax, or Houston nothing.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to a Florida or Texas team, you're pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sacramento, Mark? And more just lifestyle, less about team?
Yeah, probably just everything I've heard about the Kings, like the Sacramento area and everything like that. It's no San Diego.
Yeah, but at least in Sacramento, you're not like getting, because keep in mind, the NBA is a winter sport. So if you play for the Sacramento Kings and you got a 5-game
the snow doesn't
homestand,
bother me
What
though.
about like Minnesota?
Totally, Minnesota's way up there, right? Can you imagine playing for the Timberwolves and in December you get up and it's like, oh well, I forgot to plug my car in last night, so it froze.
Plug my car in.
You don't know about that?
Well, I'm assuming you drive electric, or you could just do gas, so you don't have to worry about electric.
That's not what I'm talking about. In Minnesota,
What?
in Minnesota, you plug your car in to keep it warm, to keep it from freezing overnight.
Plug it into what?
Yes, like a heater, like in like apartment buildings and people in their garages. You have things that you like warmers that you plug literally that come attached to the car that you have to plug it into to keep it warm overnight so it doesn't freeze.
So where's the plug is in the car?
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, what
are you talking?
What do you attach
So
it
wait,
to?
so the Minnesota cars have a plug that
Yes.
other cars don't?
That if you live in Minnesota, people have like warmers to warm their car overnight. That is correct. Look it up. I kid you not.
Where do you plug it in?
I have no idea. I've never been to Minnesota. I've never lived in Minnesota, but I know that like people will tell you they're like, yeah, you have to like keep warmers on your
So
car.
Michael Grady's plugging his car in.
I would bet you.
Like a little like 3-prong thing?
If you ask, I have no idea. If you ask Michael Grady, I'll bet he'll be like, yeah, I've heard of the car warmers. Yes, but Detroit.
I'm obsessed with this now.
How about Utah? I mean, Salt Lake City's a beautiful city, but like you're like, wait a minute, like what am I going to do in Utah?
Yeah, Utah would be a bit of a shock. How
about Charlotte? There, Charlotte Hornets.
Oh yeah, that would be way up there.
With the Thompson brother going, and it's Asar that is going to Detroit. I mean, you look at the fit there and their athletic profile. Boy, Jaden Ivey and Asar Thompson. Whew, that is some high flying acts.
More than 90% of cars in Minnesota have block heaters. It is also illegal in Minnesota in many parts to leave your car running overnight, which many people do to try to keep it warm. Yeah.
It seems like a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like the best thing to do for your home.
A relatively small investment. They keep an engine warm and easy to start throughout the cold winter nights with a block heater. I have no idea how it works, but there you go.
Just get an electric starter at that point.
I'm just telling you.
Chad Buchanan, Pacers GM, he's going to join us here in about an hour. We'll have a freebie Friday for the pop quiz coming up. On the other side, the Pacers 4 selections last night. So we'll get more into the guys that rounded out that 4-man haul, what those expectations should be for them. Kevin and Corey right here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Inquiry on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
So you had what, two guys from Michigan going around one?
Yep.
And they were bad at basketball last year? Two dudes from Houston, two dudes from Duke, and Arkansas?
Arkansas as well. And was it Anthony Black that was hurt most of the year, or was it the other one?
I think the other one, Nick Smith, who the thought was he would be higher picked than Anthony Black.
Is Nick Smith the one that looked like Rick James?
He was super emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like struggling to kind of get out words. Late first-round pick. Anthony Black went a spot ahead of Indiana, is that right?
Correct. And there was rumor that Indiana was interested in him. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was reported at one point.
Chad Buchanan going to join us here in a bit. Jake, I think it's a good question to kind of ask him, just the curiosity of how a trade like the moving back one spot with Washington sort of develops. I would assume that's a lot of trust in Washington to
totally
believe that the Pacers actually have a trade in place with another team. San Antonio, was that the rumored team?
The rumored team was that San Antonio called and said, listen, we want to move into the 7th spot to take the kid out of France, and so the Pacers called. The other question is, then how did the Pacers know that that's who Washington wanted?
Yeah, I mean, is that just intel you gather throughout the process?
Yeah,
is that agent-driven stuff?
Or does Washington call and say, listen, this is the guy we want. If anybody's calling for him, you let us know. That seems to open the door to, funny you should ask.
Right, yeah. We got Gus from San Antonio calling right now. He says they love Bilal. Paris was great to
Marty,
him.
what's his name
Marty
from ESPN?
Smith.
Marty Smith just called. Yeah, that's what he's hearing.
I do think something ESPN, it's not ESPN, I guess, more the NBA needs to figure out is you just got to get a little bit more clarity on these trade situations. Jarace Walker wearing a Wizards hat and ESPN having no idea. I mean, the amount of freak out from people. If you weren't watching on Twitter, it was utter chaos for 5 minutes for Pacers fans. Like, wait, who is this dude?
Yeah.
This is not who I thought they would take. Change up the league year, make sure your broadcast partners have a clear picture of what's going on here. That was very, very confusing. 9 o'clock hour, we'll continue the draft conversation. Again, Chad Buchanan coming up at 9:40. Kevin and Corey.
Wizards, the draft rights to Bilal Coulibaly, the 7th pick, and the Wizards are trading to the Pacers the draft rights to Jarace Walker, the 8th pick.
You know, we think Walker's a really unique prospect because of his ability to handle, see the floor pass, make plays. He's one of these guys that's just one of those rare young big guys that really has great feel for the game.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited. Like, we have some high-level talented dudes over there, like Mathurin, like you said, Turner, Halliburton.
How you like me now? How you like me now? How you like me now?
That's Jarace Walker, the 8th pick of the Indiana Pacers from last night. Pennsylvania native, played at IMG Academy, Houston for 1 year with Kelvin Sampson, and now he is with the Indiana Pacers. A solo workout for Walker with the Pacers a couple weeks back, same day as Taylor Hendricks, who actually ended up going just one spot behind Jarace Walker. That was the selection there at 8. Ben Sheppard from Belmont, a shooter, at 26. And in the second round, a couple of guards. Mojave King out of New Zealand, plays for the G League Ignite. And then Isaiah Wong from Miami. Wong, the ACC Player of the Year, lit up Indiana in the tournament for 27 points in that win. Jake, good with defense, good in the future first-round pick. Good with a shooter late first round and Ben Sheppard. Would have liked to have seen a little bit more like Flyers on wings if I'm going to nitpick there in round 2.
Yeah, a little bit. They probably need, if you look at their depth chart, they probably could use one more like power forward / center type
certainly.
insurance.
Does that mean O'Shea Brissett's back as a free agent?
Boy, that's a good question. I thought about that because they kind of do have room right now, right? And Brissett's one of those that, you know what he does, you know what he brings to you, and probably not people necessarily knocking down. You knew you could kind of wait if you wanted to bring him back. It wasn't like he was going to immediately sign a deal somewhere. So I like Brissett, as you know. I mean, I like guys like that. Walker, to me, feels like one of my favorite players in the league. And I guess, in his latest stop, or second to latest stop, I guess there were some issues. But I love Jay Crowder. And I remember, I think I even said once.
He looks like Jay Crowder.
Right. And, you need guys like that, right? Jay Crowder is kind of an enforcer type. He plays bigger than his size. He can hit a shot if the ball rotates over to him and you got to have him pull up. He can do that. And I'd love to see Walker be that kind of player. Are you familiar with Ron Wolf, Kevin? The Packer GM that put together the Brett Favre teams.
Long-time Packer GM.
Randy Edsall, you familiar with him?
The UConn head coach?
Correct. UConn and Maryland head coach. Those are the two guys that are in the notable alumni group of the same high school as Jarace Walker. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
IMG?
No, where he started high school. Sorry, he ended up going to IMG Academy.
I thought he was at 5 years at
his
IMG.
local high school in Glen Rock, Pennsylvania, is a name that I can't pronounce. Susquehannock High School. I think that's how you say it.
We got this text. We're going to be very aggressive. The new all chips in. Second round was stagnant. Then they picked low ceiling guards. Drafted no wings. Our biggest need. Leonard, Rupert, Gigi Jackson, all first round talent that slipped. Kevin Pritchard certainly has talked a bigger game about being aggressive. We'll see what happens next week when free agency begins. I tend to think if you were going to do something really, really splashy, it would have happened last night with moving that 7th overall pick. I mean, I like OG Anunoby, Jake. I like DeAndre Hunter. Dorian Finney-Smith, I think, is a decent player as well. You just see those trade packages for some of those guys, and you're like, wow, are they really worth that? And I get it. At some point, you probably got to pay for it, but I don't know. I'm not one of these people that all of a sudden thought last year meant you should speed up the rebuild from 0 to 180. I feel like continuing down this path, drafting, trying to build that way, continuing to keep a little bit in the cupboard in terms of, hey, at some point you can trade draft picks for players. I kind of like that path. So I guess I'm not one of these that walked into last night thinking fireworks or bust.
I love where the Pacers are. And I'm not trying to carry their water. I'm not trying, but Kevin, a year ago, Kevin Pritchard, Rick Carlisle, Chad Buchanan, Kelly Crosskoff. I mean, they all basically said, look, we are getting ready to start heading down a hallway, and we barely even have a flashlight. We are starting this thing from the ground up, and we have a vision of how we want to play, but we're trying to figure out how to get there. And they knew that Halliburton was going to be, and then I remember Kevin Pritchard saying they knew Halliburton was a really good player, and I remember him saying, and I'll tell you what, this Nembhard can play too. And I thought, yeah, okay, man. I mean, he's a second-round pick. They have young pieces, Kevin, at the point guard position. They're in good shape. They've got Halliburton, promising young piece. Nembhard can play that as well, you know, and McConnell, of course. Off guard, or like the 2-3 area, because positions now are a little more blurred in the NBA. They're in pretty good shape. Matherin's probably more like a 3, but you know, Neesmith's a good player, can play both spots. And then, and again, I'm going with youth here amongst the young players. Down low, Isaiah Jackson, young player. Jalen Smith, young player. I love the fact that they have pieces in multiple areas that are all young, not overly expensive. They're flexible in the positions they can play. And I thought last night, Kevin, with the 2 picks they took in the first round, they addressed 2 areas of need. And they did so with, again, young. Jarace Walker's 19 years old. Now, Sheppard, I realize, is a 4-year guy, but they need a shooter. The vision is so much more clear in 1 year. In 1 year, the clarity. By the way, are you writing notes on the back of that beautiful Cincinnati Reds logoed paper I gave you?
Yeah, I figure we should probably put it to use instead of wasting it.
I don't think it's wasted. It's got a beautiful Reds logo, the hottest team in baseball. They've won 11 straight. They got back-to-back games this weekend that are sold out at Great American
Beautiful
Ballpark.
Minnesota Wild logo that you also printed earlier this week.
Oh, that was mine. You better not touched it.
Waste of color ink.
And all of this was inadvertent. But you are starting to see it now, right? It's coming into form, and you're like, you know what? I can see, and I think that even accelerated faster than the Pacers expected. I think the Pacers were like, holy cow. Like, we actually, I don't know what happened, but like I just woke up and looked in the backyard, and like it's beautiful. Like there are flowers and trees blooming, and this is way ahead of what I expected.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at kind of a rough sketch of the starting lineup, Jake, and the depth chart, and again, next week, things could change. You don't have a lot of in-house free agents. O'Shea Brissett, easily your most notable. George Hill, James Johnson, some fringe guys. But you could certainly wheel and deal a little bit. But let's say a starting lineup looks like this. Halliburton, Hield, Matherin, Jarace Walker, Miles Turner. Okay? I think that checks. And then a second unit, McConnell's probably your point guard. And then at the 2, 3, 4, you can probably put all these guys potentially in those spots. You've got Andrew Nembhard. You've got Ben Sheppard, who you just took out of Belmont. You've got Aaron Neesmith. You've got Jordan Nwora. We'll see about Chris Duarte. But that's about, 6 guys that at various points in their careers, and again, we'll see about Sheppard, have shown some sort of shooting, some sort of scoring, some sort of versatility. And then the bigs, you still have Daniel Tice, Isaiah Jackson, and Jalen Smith. That's a nice core. I don't think it's a core I look at and think it's a 3 seed, but I think it's a nice core to continue to grow. It's got youth. It's got some versatility. It's got a few guys that I think, in Halliburton's case, is an all-star. In Matherin's case, can be that. You've added some defensive punch with Walker. You still need to add more, I would think, in that end. But I look at that group and think that should be a playoff core, and we'll see what happens next week to add to that.
Duarte's the guy you feel bad for. And I don't know why, Kevin, because, in other words, I know why we feel bad for him, because it just feels like he's fallen out of rotation. But I don't know why he has, because remember what a promising piece he was early? And it just feels like you kind of don't know where to put him. And he struggled, and I mean, he has talent, right? He has talent, but where do you plug it? Where do you feel good putting him consistently?
Yeah, I don't, to answer the question. I mean, if I'm going to pencil in a second unit, McConnell, Nembhard, Neesmith, Wara, and I still have Ben Sheppard outside looking in right now. I mean, you have a little bit of a log jam there, kind of at that 2-guard spot, depending on what you do. I mean, at some point, I'm probably more of a fan of just letting Nembhard be the point guard, the backup point guard of the future, and letting McConnell walk. Again, I don't think we're there just yet, but I do think that is something that at some point you would look at. But I thought if there was a loser category from last night, Jake, or guys that watched the draft and thought, oh boy, I would have looked at those 2 2021 first-round picks of the Pacers. I would have looked at Duarte more than Isaiah Jackson. But I thought both of them probably watched last night and thought, I mean, if you're Isaiah Jackson, you're like, wait, I couldn't get consistent minutes last year, and now they just drafted a dude 8th overall to play the 4 position.
But Jackson, though, I think they also can put it to 5, right?
Yeah. Okay. So is Trayce done? Are we done with the Daniel Trayce?
Yeah,
thing?
that's a good, and I like Trayce, but I think Trayce is probably the one that you look at and go, who gets squeezed out here? It might be Daniel Trayce because he was kind of the enforcer, right, or thought to be.
You probably have 4 questions you need to ask as an organization. 4 player questions you need to ask as an organization in the next week, Jake. And all of these, I guess, are we done or what does the future look like? And the 4 players would be Chris Duarte, Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith, and Daniel Trayce.
Okay, those middle 2, I think you've seen enough to know that they're worth holding on to, don't you think?
I would say Jackson more than Smith, which is a shame because I was high on Smith.
I know. I think a lot of people were.
But again, you just drafted Walker. I mean, you got to give Walker minutes. So that's where you're in a bit of a jumble there.
Yeah, Jackson, I still think I'm a big believer in Jackson, but this is going to have to be you got to show me year, right? He's had plenty of chances.
Yeah, this is year 3. This is critical for him. If you were to tell Indiana basketball fans last night that Trayce Jackson-Davis would be passed on by the Pacers, I would say at 3 different points of the draft, you would have told them that Trayce Jackson-Davis gets taken with the second to last pick of the draft. They would have been, I think, pretty upset or disappointed by that. But, Jake, I think him and Golden State is about as perfect of a fit as he could have asked
Totally.
for.
Because by the time I got to about pick 55, I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, my gosh, there's only 5 picks.
I mean, hell, he was tweeting like he was going undrafted.
Yeah.
You're all going to regret it.
And I think that you got to a point where you thought to yourself, he is better off now not getting drafted so that he can select where he goes and go to the best fit. And if that were the case, Kevin, Golden State is probably one of them that you would have said would be the best fit, right?
No one on their roster over 6'9". One of their guys that is 6'9" is JaMychal Green. He's 33 years old. When you talk about teams like Golden State or in Jalen Hood-Schifino's case going to the Lakers at 17, those are teams that have to have rookies on their roster, just purely financially.
Correct, yeah.
They cannot afford to, have their 9th, 10th, 11th guys making notable amounts of money. So you walk into great situations there. Plus, they also, both of those teams, you would consider them win now. Like Golden State, they aren't going to just fart around with a bunch of, 19-year-olds to try and grow and develop. They're looking, especially with the Chris Paul move, they are in a win-now move, and you would think Trayce kind of fits some of that. Maybe not as a 7th, 8th guy, but could he be a 9th or a 10th guy for that second unit? If you look at their roster, Mike Dunleavy, their GM, said it last night, we've got room for him on our 15-man roster. And for the majority of second-round picks, probably both the Pacers' second-round picks, 2-way contracts is what your rookie year usually looks like.
By the way, which player was it last night? We were talking about some of the awkward interviews. I can't remember which player it was where he's sitting there with his mom, and they say, Cindy or whatever the mom's name was, what a tremendous story, as a single mother that raised him, how proud are you of everything he overcame? And she's like, oh, it's great. And she's like, that's wonderful.
Very generic mom name.
And then she says, and then the interviewer says, now let's bring his dad in. They interview his dad. I'm like, wait a minute. That guy had to have been like, wait a minute.
Oh, this is awkward.
I'm here, guys. You know what I mean?
Did you have the wrong note card for that?
Maybe it meant in that moment she was a single mom because her father wasn't on camera.
Literally, it was like, well, thank you so much for telling the story about your trials as a single mother. Now let's talk to the dad.
I did get nervous for her. I'm like, boy, those note cards better be double, triple checked. You know, because you're addressing the parents by name. You're trying to pull out like that little anecdote from their childhood. And it's like, oh, wait, that was the Grady Dick card. Excuse me, Jalen Hood-Schifino. Let's
and you're so right, though,
next.
Kevin, about the one where it's like, now, why did you hug all your siblings?
What are we doing? Because they're my family members?
I mean, yeah.
Have you ever seen the green room? They hug everybody. They hug the water guy that goes around and fills up water.
I don't remember, I don't recall it being this... Like in years past, and it's totally cool, don't get me wrong, but in years past, I don't remember the length of time of usually they stand up and they hug like the two people at the table, and then like their coach is standing right there and they go right up to the stairs. This year it was like they literally went around and you're right, hugged everyone. The guy that escorts them to the hats was getting hugged. And then the hats are sitting there, and I guess they say like you just put on the hat on top, right? Because they were kind of stacked. Did you notice that?
Gosh, there are times I thought Jarace Walker's hat would fall off with all that hair he's got.
Do you trade if you and I, if you are, and I forget is it Koulibaly? Is that how you say it?
That sounds great.
If that's you and I'm Jarace Walker, and we know, and so you put on the Pacer hat and I put on the Wizards hat.
No, I make the NBA give me another hat.
And then they come to me and they say, you've just been traded. Do you just swap the hats?
No, I say I want if I am Walker, I want my Wizards hat.
You know that the Cincinnati Bengals, I think it was Joe Burrow that said this, that when the Cincinnati Bengals drafted, I believe it was Joe Burrow, and he goes up there and they give him the hat and he puts the hat on and then takes the photo. He got his first paycheck, and in the paycheck it had itemized expenses, and the cost of the hat and the jersey were taken out of his. We're taken out of his paycheck. He's like, what is this?
No wonder that indoor facility didn't get built till like last year.
What is this $29 surcharge to fan side?
I will
that's the hat we gave you.
I will fully admit my Victor Wembanyama experience of him off the floor has been like in that interview last night, the Brian Windhorst 92nder, maybe one other. I really like Wembanyama off the floor.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Like he is going to check that box for me at least early on, and I think as a brand, I think as, just the face of a franchise, all of that. Yeah.
And who was it who said, I can't remember who said, he will play in front of a sold-out crowd his entire career.
Kevin Pritchard said that the night after the lottery. Yeah, he will never play in a non-sold-out venue.
Yeah. I mean,
Now, are Pacers ticket office people bummed that Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trayce Jackson-Davis both to the Western Conference?
Boy, that's a good point there. Good point there.
Miss out on an additional home game.
Is there any? If you're Jalen Hood-Schifino and you thought you were going to go 13th to Toronto, are you disappointed to slide 4 spots when you find out you're going to play for the Lakers? Is there any all you have to do is go one time to Huntington Beach, California, and you're like, okay, yeah, where do I sign up here?
Well, plus two, I think it's like a nice early transition to the NBA life where you matter, but you don't matter as much as, if you would have sent to some bottom feeder. But then there's got to be a passing of the torch soon with the Lakers. And you would think he would be a part of it.
Yeah.
You would think he would be part of that kind of new young core. All right, Chad Buchanan, Pacers GM in 20. Before we get to a Freebie Friday pop quiz, 317-239-1070 for that. Let's go with the morning checkdown.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Actually, before we get to the draft itself and how it affected the Pacers, a couple of notes from the association from last night. Notably, the Bulls are announcing that they are expecting Lonzo Ball with another knee surgery to miss the entire season once again. Meanwhile, Kawhi Leonard says his knee's 100%. He will be ready to go by training camp, so no issues there. And Jay Billis, after the draft, said that the guy that the Pacers selected, Jarace Walker, is the guy as a rookie that he thinks might have been the biggest impact player that was selected last night, not named, obviously, Victor Wembanyama.
Speaking of the Pacers draft picks last night, Rick Carlisle did meet the media. Let's start with Carlisle's thoughts on Jarace Walker at number 8 overall.
In a league where defensive versatility, the ability to switch and contain is so important, we believe he can do that. And then, offensively, there's a chance here that he could really evolve into a special kind of four-man in this league. A guy that can rebound it and take it coast to coast and make plays and finish at the rim and, do all that stuff. So I think when our fans start to watch him, they'll see the possibilities.
And then later on at number 26 overall, it was Ben Sheppard, the guard out of Belmont. Rick Carlisle enjoyed the process of Ben Sheppard kind of rising up the draft boards. Here was Carlisle on the shooter from Belmont.
He played great on both ends. He's got a high skill level. He's had a pretty consistent rise in the draft, starting with the combine where he played extremely well. So, he's a 6'5" wing player. He just moves, he shoots it, passes it, dribbles it, defends, goes hard.
Sheppard, by the way, 4-year player out of Belmont, and out of the Moval I like because I think it's just a really well-coached league. 41% three-point shooter in his last year at Belmont.
Speaking of, the Moval, Omaha, the site of the College World Series, and last night it was a pretty epic performance on the mound. A great pitcher's duel as expected between Wake Forest and LSU, but in the 11th, as both teams went into their bullpens, it was Tommy Tanks. No better name for a home run masher than Tommy Tanks. And he hit one over the left field wall to send LSU to the College World Series Championship Series, which is a best of 3 that will begin tomorrow. That'll be Saturday and Sunday, potentially Monday. Best of 3 with the Florida Gators. With the loss last night, Wake Forest had 2 chances to get to the championship series. They lost both of them. So we'll get Brian Kelly's family against Florida for the College World Series.
When he hit that home run, Wake Forest added a little letter T right in the middle of their hat. That was their reaction, just so you know, in case you're
Hi, my name's Alfred D'Elia. At home, they call me Big Al, and I hit dingers.
Tommy Tanks' cousin.
That's right, his little brother.
On there? Yeah.
Last night, Major League Baseball, Diamondbacks over the Nationals 5-3. It was the Athletics beaten by the Guardians 6-1 in our race for PBR. Marlins over the Pirates 6-4. And again, Reds and Braves this weekend, I am told, sold out at Great American Ballpark.
Fever beat Seattle last night to start their 4-game road trip. Pop quiz time. Give us a call, 317-239-1070 on this Freebie Friday.
Have you studied? Can you handle the pressure? Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with Kevin and Query. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
All right, it's Pop Quiz time on this Freebie Friday. A combo effort from the substitute teachers to round out the week before Scotty returns with the Pop Quizzes from Hell starting on Monday.
1924 Fort Wayne Piston.
Yeah. Warren Spahn's second cousin played for the...
In pre-World War I, this happened.
Jake, number 1 through 8 on this Freebie Friday.
The Pacers were supposed to pick 7, but they ended up picking... Well, they picked 7, but you get what I'm saying here, right? They ended up getting the guy that went 8, so we'll go with 8.
Mark?
8 is Matt.
Matt!
How's it going, gentlemen?
Matt, how's it going with you, man?
Good, good.
Matt, what's on the weekend agenda?
Got a graduation party tomorrow to put on, so a little busy.
Oh, who graduated?
Congrats.
My son.
And your son's name is?
Zane.
Zane, you said?
Oh, is this Zane? This is Matt, Ben Davis, Matt, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
What's up, Matt? Congrats on Zane and Ball State.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, your son is playing basketball at Ball State, right? Going to go play for Michael Lewis?
Yep.
Very cool.
Hell of a state final performance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yes, it was.
Well, Matt, we're going to give a little combo effort of this pop quiz. Chad Buchanan's going to join us in a few. Appreciate you calling. Good luck with the party. Plenty of, what do you think? Pigs in a blanket, maybe?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Chick-fil-A nuggets. Yeah. It'd be perfect for that. Mark, you want to lead us off?
Sure, I'll lead you off. Sure, why not? All right. Where'd it go? Okay. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the 2003 NBA draft, which famously had LeBron James go number 1 overall to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Pacers did not have a first-round pick that year. Who was the Pacers' lone draft pick with the 49th overall pick in 2003? Was it Fred Jones, James Jones, Jamison Brewer, or David Harrison?
2003.
This guy's a GM right now in the league.
He
correct?
is. It sounded like this, Matt.
Oh, James Jones.
Oh, nice. I didn't have to do my impersonation.
Do another one, or you want to?
Should I slide in there for number 2? Okay, James. Okay, Matt. Ben Sheppard, 26 overall by the Pacers. Where did he play collegiately? Murray State.
Belmont.
Matt's here.
All right, Matt. Question 3.
Valedictorian for this graduation
There were
party.
5 schools that saw 2 players selected in the first round last night. Can you name? Should we go with 1 or 2 of them, guys?
Go 2. Let's
Can you name
challenge Matt.
2 of the 5 schools, Matt, that saw 2 players selected in the first round last night?
Well, I know Michigan for sure.
Yep.
Huh?
I believe Bama was another one.
Okay.
Bama. Okay. Mark, you want to go with 4?
Sure. We have a race for PBR for the best record of MLB teams projected to finish under 500. Jake has the Baltimore Orioles, Kevin has the Oakland Athletics, and I have the Arizona Diamondbacks. Of those 3, which team has made the postseason most recently? The Orioles, the Athletics, the Diamondbacks, or all 3 made the playoffs in 2021?
Oh, Diamondbacks make the playoffs. I'm going to go with the Orioles.
All right, Matt, to round it out, 26 years ago this week, the first WNBA game was played. Name one of the 2 teams that played in the first ever game in the WNBA.
I'm guessing on this, Kevin. Is this right?
Correct. That is one of the 2. Yep. Say it again, Matt.
It's got to be the Liberty. Good New York in there.
Great minds
Matt
think alike, Jake
smart
Query.
dude, man. Smart
That
dude.
is a smart fella here. All right, Matt, good work. It's Freebie Friday, so certainly hang on the line. James Jones was correct to lead off.
That is correct.
Belmont for Ben Sheppard.
Correcto.
Jake, a little slip up on yours. Is that correct?
No, he was right, actually.
Bama has 2?
Bama did have 2. Alabama, Arkansas, Duke, Michigan, and Houston, the 5.
Oh, there's 5 of them. For some reason, I thought there was only 4.
I missed one earlier.
Slip up came on my
slip up
second
was on
question.
Mark's.
Yep. It was, he said the Orioles last made the playoffs in 2016. The Diamondbacks last made the playoffs in 2017. It was Kevin's Oakland
my
Athletics
pesky A's, baby.
that made it in the COVID year of 2020.
Congrats, Matt.
You don't get to come back
The cool
tomorrow.
thing for Matt's
You don't
son,
even get a lousy copy
going
of
from
our
Ben Davis
home
to play
game.
basketball at Ball State.
You're a complete...
I think Ball State's got the most underrated basketball arena in the state.
Worthen?
Yeah, I think it's a great arena.
Nice first year for Michael Lewis. Zane was committed to Valpo, and then they had their coaching change. Roger Powell, former Illinois forward, now the head coach of Valpo. A great tournament run for Ben Davis, of course, and a great 4A state title game for Zane Dowdy. And now he is off to play for Michael Lewis and the Chirp Trippers. A lot of Indiana flavor on that team for Ball State.
You know, one of the interesting things last night, Kevin, a lot of people, somebody asked me, they're like, so Zach Edey's going back to college. When was the last time the Wooden Award winner actually went back to college?
boy.
And the answer to that was the year before.
And he went undrafted, right?
And he went undrafted this year, yeah.
Drew Timme undrafted as well.
Boy, I forgot about Drew Timme.
Drew Timme to the Bucks Summer League.
He looks like he'd live in Minnesota, doesn't he? Or I mean, not Minnesota, Wisconsin, doesn't he?
I did. We'll get a little bit more into a Summer League roster maybe coming up on next week, but it looked like the Pacers have got a 5'9" guard, Darius McGee from Liberty. I know a lot of people giving high praise for him for scoring at a big-time level. Great shooter at Liberty, but obviously 5'9", 150 pounds doesn't do a whole lot for you, but certainly we've seen 5'9" guys make it in the NBA. We'll see if he can find a spot with the Pacers. Speaking of that, Chad Buchanan, the team's general manager, he joins us to round out the show. Kevin and Query on a Friday.
We'll talk about that and more. The Ride with JMV today at 3.
You're listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
These are the kinds of guys that we want to build this roster and this organization with. So, we're really thrilled with the first round.
Rick Carlisle last night, as the Pacers had 4 draft picks. We'll chat with Chad Buchanan here in a few, the GM of the Pacers, more about that quartet. I think a lot of Pacers fans were initially caught off guard, Jake, when they took Bilal, and again, I'll try my best at pronouncing it, Kulabi, something like that. Initially, with that 7th pick, they traded the one spot with Washington, got a couple second-rounders, and saved a little bit of money and ended up taking Jarace Walker, or I should say drafting Jarace Walker. Anyways, do you have a favorite Pacers career? Is it Bilal Kulabi? Is it DeAndre Ayton? Is it Serge Ibaka?
Eric Piatkowski?
Ricky Rubio?
Eric Piatkowski? Oh, no, wait, Danny Ferry.
It's got to be Kawhi Leonard, right?
Kawhi?
Kawhi, yeah. Danny Ferry's up there, though, I'm telling you.
I think Rick Carlisle had it was fun while it lasted, to sum up Tristan Thompson's career.
That was a good one, actually.
Now, he actually played.
And he played well for a game, right?
He
played and it was good. Speaking of that, somebody just texted me this, and I'm going to throw this out there, and people, you can text me your answer on this. People have my cell phone number by now. Somebody just sent me a message that said, hey, where's a good place to play pickup basketball in Indy now? My gym, Lifetime Fitness, was great for pickup ball, but it's now pickle ball. They took out the basketball courts. So I don't know. Ben Davis used to be fabulous for pickup basketball.
Wasn't the JCC always a pretty good run?
That's probably a good place too. So I don't know. Somebody let me know. I'm retired. I believe 5
Lance
years ago.
Stevenson's played at the Downtown Y a time or two. If you're looking for something right off Delaware,
that's right there in the Athenaeum,
Ursay
right?
YMCA.
Oh, okay, that one.
Ursay YMCA.
Oh, Nifs is pretty good, right?
Good call there.
I don't know if Nifs still has pickup ball.
If you play a game, though, you know what you're going to say?
Well, it was fun while it lasted.
That's a good way to describe it.
It's beautiful.
The
right?
Tristan Thompson era on that end. Again, Chad Buchanan from the Pacers is going to join us here in a few. We should have Jarace Walker's high school coach, played at IMG Academy. He is scheduled to join us looking ahead to Monday's show.
Joining us now on the Payless Liquors Hotline, and I'm guessing he got up 5 minutes ago because it was a late night, I'm sure, for Chad Buchanan, the general manager of the Indiana Pacers. And Chad, I realize that right off the box you're going to say that you guys got everybody you wanted. And I say that both probably seriously and flippantly at the same time, as odd as that sounds. But just overall kind of your assessment, did it turn out to be a more frantic night than you anticipated?
Well, first of all, I don't think it was 5 minutes ago. Who says I've gone to sleep yet?
Yeah, there you go. Fair enough.
But no, a very successful night, I think, for us. I think every team wakes up the day after the draft and feels good about their picks. And, we got a couple guys that we really, really had targeted and liked going in. Our board, I think, the top 10 guys probably went about in the order we expected. And we had a couple guys we were very comfortable with drafting, depending on who went before us. And Jarace was a guy that we've liked all season long, both from a positional need, the talent level, the character standpoint. There's just a lot of boxes that he checked that made him a big priority for us. And Ben Sheppard is another player that came in and really impressed us in the workout. Was great at the combine. A guy that we tracked for the last 2 years that has really grown on us too. So in the second round, Mojave and Isaiah. Second round is such a crapshoot, but excited to see what those guys could turn into as well. So, we felt it was a very successful night for us.
Okay, in quick fashion, before we get to the kind of the nuances of the players, I'm curious, with the trade that took place, I think we now know what took place with Washington. I mean, San Antonio apparently calls and says, look, we have interest in this at 7, so you go to Washington and you say, we're getting. I guess my question would be this, Chad. How did you know that Washington had interest in the player that you selected for them at 7? And why not just swap the picks in advance and have Washington make the 7th pick? Is that a time issue?
Yeah, some of it's a time issue. Some of it didn't play out exactly how you mentioned there either. When you have multiple teams chasing a player that maybe is a player that you're not targeting, it puts you in a position to try to, move down a little bit and, pick up an asset or two that can help you, in the long run. And a lot of this stuff happens right on the clock. I mean, it happens fast. And like I said, a lot of teams coming after something at the same time, at the very, very last moment, cause you to have to make a decision. And we were comfortable moving back for a small, like I said, a small assets coming to us and still getting the guy we had targeted. So it was a very easy decision for us.
Chad Buchanan's with us here, the Pacers general manager. But Chad, before we get to Jarace Walker, how close were you guys, if at all, of trading number 7 for a veteran or trading up in the draft?
We didn't have as many options as we had hoped for a veteran that we had targeted. We tried very, very, very hard to do that. We had a group of players around the league that we felt would be a great fit with our young core that played a position of need that we went after about as aggressive as we possibly can without sacrificing, our complete future. But unfortunately, those players were not available. And so, we tried on that front. But at the end of the day, we were very comfortable with a couple guys staying at pick 7 and adding another young player to our core to try to build with.
Obviously, Jarace Walker was the selection. You don't play for Kelvin Sampson if you can't guard on that end of the floor. What is it about his physical makeup, his IQ defensively that is so attractive and addressing, obviously, a major area of need for you guys?
Sure. You guys watched our team all year last year. We had a lot of offensive talent, and we were very poor on the defensive side. So that was a big emphasis for us and will continue to be as we add to this team as guys that can come in and improve us on the defensive side. And Jarace does that. Jarace has a lot of versatility to his game. He's a guy who played point guard for a little bit of time in high school, and he's got a great feel for the game, which Coach Carlisle and our staff really value. A feel for the game, ability to play in a flow offense, to make quick decisions with the ball, very unselfish, just a good fit for us in a lot of ways. But mostly we're excited about his potential to defend. Defending that position, the 6'7" to 6'8", 6'9" scoring hybrids is it's a challenge in our league. And Aaron Neesmith did as good a job as he can with that. He's a little undersized against some of those guys, where Jarace has a little more size and physicality to throw at some of these, Jason Tatums and Giannis's of the world. But that's where we felt like he was a good fit for us, specifically as a defender.
Chad, obviously I realize that if something comes along that's going to make your team better, you're going to make a move. I get that. But in terms of moves precipitated by Indiana, by the Pacers, are you guys done for now, or are there still some auxiliary moves that can be made?
I wouldn't say we're done, for right now. We're going to continue to explore what's out there. I mean, we have one roster spot right now still. There were other minor trade opportunities that we did not pursue that, probably still there if we would like to. We wanted to see how our draft night played out. But we still have, on our roster, we're happy with the young core, but, I think we got to look at maybe adding one more player to a certain role, and we'll look at that. We've still got cap room left. Like I said, we have the roster spot available. We have a two-way contract available, a couple of those. So we still have tools to use, and we got some time here to look into those.
How heavily did you explore Trayce Jackson-Davis at 55?
I mean, we love Trayce Jackson-Davis as a player, and sometimes it's got to be a mutual interest. You don't want to have a player with you that is not coming in wanting to be there. And so, Trayce is going to be a terrific player. And like I said, we were big fans. Obviously, our roster and what he is, the position he plays, wasn't a great fit. And we understood that. And, his representatives understood that. But, if we had been in a situation where we didn't have 4 players at his position, I think Trayce would have been a great option for us. And like I said, we were big fans of his game.
So then was there discussion, I would assume from Trayce Jackson-Davis or his camp, that he would have been happier going elsewhere and that he didn't feel Indiana was a fit for him.
I think that's accurate to say.
Interesting.
I mean, given the roster makeup, I
Sure.
think it makes total sense, and why we've said throughout the show, Golden State on paper much better fit than where things are with Indiana. Chad Buchanan with us, the Pacers GM. Chad, let's chat a little bit more about Ben Sheppard. I know the shooting and the scoring ability at Belmont stands out. I was saying to Jake earlier, I feel like when I hear of good mid-major shooters, I think the stereotype is they can't guard anybody, but it seems like defense is not a liability by any means with him.
No, I think Ben is a two-way player. He's the thing that stands out about Ben. This seems like something very minor. Is he is in phenomenal shape, and he's in constant motion on both sides of the floor. He's offensively, he's just running off screens. He's sprinting the lanes. He's curling off picks. He's pushing the ball in transition off defensive rebounds. His motor just never stops. And then that carries over on the defensive side too. He's just a guy with a great effort level, a great care factor, tremendous character. I think the fans and the media are going to love Ben Sheppard. We just really grew to like him in the pre-draft process, and the shooting up component obviously is something that we value in Rick's system, and he brings a lot of that as well. So there's a lot to like about Ben.
Chad, one of the things that jumped out at me last night, Chad Buchanan's our guest, the GM of the Indiana Pacers. He's on the Payless Liquors hotline. One of the things that jumped out at me last night, of all the players that were selected, was it struck me how incredibly mature, humble, and just really impressive the vast majority of these young men were. And I'm curious, are we starting to now see, and there's a lot about this I don't like, quite frankly, but is part of that the byproduct of the fact that now you are getting players that have been in the limelight and under a spotlight since the age of 14, 15 years old, and thus have a better understanding of all of the expectation that comes with being selected in the NBA?
That's a great question, Jake. I think there is some accuracy to what you're saying. These guys that come into the league, it's very rare that we interview a guy at the draft or when they come through our building that we're not like, gosh, it's a really sharp, bright, articulate young man. And they're well prepared these days by their representation and their families, and they know the importance of making a good representation of themselves when they meet with NBA teams. And I think last night's a great example. You see all these kids. I mean, they're living out their dream in front of the world on TV, and how they carry themselves and answer questions and handle the situation is, I feel like every year it just gets more and more impressive. And I think every year we find less and less players in this draft that are red flags from a character standpoint. And I think that's a representation of what you're saying, of just their amount of time they spend around each other and in the limelight. I think that's very accurate, Jake.
Okay, Chad Buchanan with us here, Pacers general manager. Obviously, a quick turnaround now to free agency here in about a week. Chad, if you had to kind of lay out needs as you guys enter free agency and certainly the ability to still execute some trades, what would that needs list look like?
I think it's balancing our roster right now. I mean, we still have 4 centers. We have a couple guys at the power forward spot that, young guys between, Jarace, Aaron Neesmith, Jordan Nowara can all play the 4. I mean, maybe another wing forward, if we balance out our roster would help. Maybe another point guard. I mean, we're going to look at all those kind of things here in the next couple of weeks with trades and free agency.
Chad, how important was it? You had so many assets going into the draft in terms of, and I'm talking about before even the trade with Denver. Was there a concerted effort, as crazy as this sounds, to alleviate yourself of the number of picks you had in this draft to give that flexibility, not only of roster, but of cap room as well?
Yeah, I think it was more so when you go into a draft with 5 picks and you have 3 roster spots, you obviously got to be aggressive to try to manage that component. You have the 2 ways as an option. We're trying to maintain as much ammunition for when the right player comes along via trade. So, the trade we made with Denver and accumulating another pick in next year's draft is kind of kicking the can down the curb a little bit, where if next trade deadline or this summer or even next draft, if having that extra first is what gets you over the hump to get a player that you have targeted, that's always a good thing to do from a business standpoint. And, last night we moved around quite a bit. We moved, a couple picks out. We moved down a little bit. So we were trying to juggle as much as we could so at the end of the night we could come away with, some ammunition for this summer and into next year. And that's what the future first, I think, has a lot of value for us and for teams around the league. So we feel good about that. And just being in position to make a go-for-it move when that opportunity presents itself is important for us.
Chad, I had mentioned this earlier. In the mid-'90s, there was this art fad called Magic Eye. I don't know if you remember these, but they were the pictures that were computer-generated, and you had to stare at them for 5 minutes, and then eventually a 3D image came into form, and you're like, oh, my gosh, I see it now. Does that ring a bell to you? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Does that feel like the assembly you guys have done with this roster? Because a year ago, I think even by your guys' own admission, you were still kind of waiting to see when the picture was going to form. And it seems to me like the picture has formed even faster than you anticipated, and the vision of where the Indiana Pacers are and can go is clearer, faster than perhaps you even thought. Am I off base?
Possibly so. I think, Ty obviously changes everything for us. Finding the right pieces around him is important, but also not being in a rush to jump up to, being the 8th seed and being stuck in the 7th and 8th seed range. I think the hardest thing in the NBA is resisting the urge to be 5 games better and limiting yourself, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So being patient. We just saw the Denver Nuggets be patient with their core and slowly build around it, and it culminated in a championship. And I think that is what we're trying to do. There's always going to be temptations along the way, and you want to be good and continue to grow. That is our goal, but you want to do it the right way. So we feel good about this young core. We know we still have a lot of work to do. We're not anywhere near where we need to be or want to be, but I think last night was a good step forward for us, and I think Jarace will be a great fit for us.
Chad, last one from me. Was there any thought when a guy like Cam Whitmore starts to slide to try and trade up?
I can assure you we tried as hard as we possibly could on that one. And that was we called basically from about pick 10 down until his name came off the board. It was a frantic room trying to be aggressive to move up into that range. And unfortunately, it takes 2 teams to tango on that one, and most of those teams had their guy and did not want to move, and we were very aggressive. That's why we had these extra picks to do things like that. And, unfortunately, your aggressiveness doesn't always match up the other team's willingness to do something. But we were very aggressive trying to move up last night.
Okay, last one from me, Chad, and we only got 45 seconds left, unfortunately. But when you look at your roster, the position where you still need some more competition amongst your roster would be which position where you need more depth?
I would probably say the 3-4 spot, I think, would be where, if I see maybe where a hole might be good to place another player. Obviously it's not the center spot. Another role that we really, really like is having a veteran mentor with a young group in our locker room. James Johnson was that last year and had a good impact on our young group. So I think those are the 2 spots that if I see probably a need, that would be where we'd look to address.
Chad, I always enjoy our conversations. It's terrific insight no matter what we throw at you. Enjoyed the golf outing experience last summer with you. Hopefully we can do that again here in a few months. And good luck with all the chaos that will certainly continue next week as well.
Thank you. Hey, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our staff. It takes a village to run a draft. Ryan Carr, all of our scouts, Sonia Clettinger, Susie Fisher, all the people on our admin staff. They deserve a big shout out. They don't get the credit for what goes into an NBA draft. So I just wanted to give them a big shout out and thank you. But I appreciate you guys.
See you, Chad.
All right.
That's Chad Buchanan right there. Pacers GM, outstanding on a variety of questions thrown at him. Like I said, Jake, I always enjoy Chad's candor. Really good stuff.
A Trayce Jackson-Davis quote. You have to tweet that out so you can listen to it again.
Cam Whitmore action. We'll talk to you Monday. See you.